What happens when the man who never loved you suddenly can't let you go? Elena Russo walked into that notary office, ready to sign away 8 years of golden loneliness. But the moment her ex-husband saw her kiss another man, everything changed. Now Rafael Moretti, the crime boss who treated her like furniture, is tearing apart their divorce with obsessive precision. And Elena is about to discover that escaping a man like Rafe isn't about signing papers. It's about surviving his awakening. If you want to see how far love can twist when it finally arrives too late, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The notary's office smelled like old leather and broken promises. Elena Russo sat perfectly still in the stiff-backed chair, her hands folded in her lap like a finishing school graduate waiting for inspection. Across the polished mahogany table, her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, signed his name with the same casual efficiency he used for business contracts. Rafael Moretti didn't look up, didn't pause. The gold Mont Blanc pen moved across the paper in smooth, practiced strokes, and Elena watched each letter form with a strange sense of detachment, as if she were observing someone else's life collapse into legal terminology and notarized stamps. 8 years. 8 years reduced to signatures and initials. The notary, a thin woman with reading glasses on a chain, cleared her throat delicately. Mrs. Moretti, if you'll sign here, here, and initial here. Mrs. Moretti. For a few more minutes, anyway. Elena reached for the pen the woman offered, ignoring the one Rafe had set down between them, the pen he'd given her on their first anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries. Her hand didn't shake. That surprised her. She'd expected tremors, maybe tears, some physical manifestation of what should have been grief. Instead, she felt oddly calm, as if her body had already accepted what her mind had been processing for months. She signed her maiden name, Elena Russo. The letters looked foreign after so many years of Moretti, but they also looked like freedom. That concludes our business. The notary gathered the papers with practiced efficiency, adding stamps and seals with the mechanical precision of someone who'd witnessed 1,000 endings. The decree will be final in 30 days, barring any contests there won't be any contests. Rafe's voice cut through the sterile air, smooth and certain. He stood, buttoning his Tom Ford suit jacket with one hand while checking his phone with the other. My attorney has the settlement terms. Everything's already arranged. Of course it was. Rafael Moretti didn't do anything that wasn't already arranged, controlled, predicted 3 moves ahead. That was how he'd built an empire that stretched from legitimate real estate holdings to ventures Elena had learned not to ask about. Control was his native language. Emotion was a foreign dialect he'd never bothered to learn. Elena stood as well, smoothing down the simple black dress she'd chosen that morning. Not mourning clothes, she'd stopped mourning this marriage 2 years ago. Just armor. Simple, elegant, forgettable. The way Rafe had always preferred her in public. Beautiful, but not flashy. Present, but not prominent. A perfect accessory to his perfect image. Mrs. Moretti Armands. Russo, do you need a moment? The notary's voice carried a thread of sympathy that made Elena's throat tighten unexpectedly. No. Elena's voice came out steady. I'm ready. Rafe finally looked at her then, his dark eyes flicking up from his phone screen with the same casual attention he might give a restaurant menu. Handsome. He'd always been handsome, with the kind of sharp features and commanding presence that made people step aside when he entered a room. Salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than aging, a jawline that belonged on magazine covers. But there was nothing behind those eyes when he looked at her. No regret, no nostalgia, no acknowledgement that they'd once stood in front of witnesses and promised forever. Good luck, Elena. He said it like he was wrapping up a business lunch with a minor associate. Pleasant, professional, already thinking about his next appointment. Then he walked out. Elena stood there for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway, listening to the expensive shoes that had walked away from her 1,000 times before. Birthday dinners cut short by phone calls. Anniversary trips canceled for emergency meetings. Entire weekends where they lived in the same penthouse, but existed in different worlds, Rafe buried in his office while Elena perfected the art of being invisible. Miss Russo? The notary's voice was gentler now. Are you all right? Was she? Elena took inventory. No tears, no rage, no dramatic collapse. Just a strange, weightless feeling, like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "I'm fine." And the surprising thing was, she meant it. "Thank you." She gathered her purse, not the Hermes bag Rafe had given her last Christmas in lieu of his presents, but a simple leather tote she'd bought herself last month, and walked out of the office that had just legally ended her marriage. The hallway was empty. Rafe was already gone, probably in his car, probably on his phone, probably having already forgotten the appointment entirely. The elevator ride down to the parking garage was long enough for Elena to check her reflection in the polished doors. 32 years old. Still attractive, though she'd never quite believed it the way Rafe's business associates' wives seemed to believe their own beauty. That aggressive, maintained perfection that required teams of professionals and ruthless dedication. Elena had always been softer, quieter. Her dark hair fell in natural waves past her shoulders. No extensions needed. Her face was makeup minimal today, just enough to look polished, but not enough to suggest she'd tried too hard. Brown eyes that looked tired even when she was rested. She looked like herself. Finally. For the first time in 8 years, she looked like Elena Russo instead of Mrs. Raphael Moretti. The garage was dim and cold, all concrete and exhaust fumes, and the echo of her heels against the floor. Elena walked toward her car, not the Mercedes Rafe had given her, which she'd left in the penthouse garage that morning, but the modest Honda sedan she'd bought with her own money from her own account. Another small act of reclamation. She was halfway to her car when she saw him. Rafe stood next to his black Range Rover, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something the person on the other end said. And next to him, leaning against the car with the casual elegance of someone who belonged there, was a woman Elena had never seen before. Blonde, polished, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of body that required personal trainers and the kind of style that required personal shoppers. She wore a cream-colored blazer over a silk blouse, designer jeans that probably cost more than Elena's entire outfit, and heels that added 3 inches to her already considerable height. At all. No guilt, no surprise. No at all. No guilt, no surprise. No acknowledgement that his ex-wife of approximately 15 minutes might find this scene even slightly jarring. He just kept talking into his phone, kept smiling at whatever the blonde woman was saying, kept existing in his world where Elena had always been peripheral. The blonde noticed Elena's stare and smiled. Not hostile, not smug, just pleasant and unbothered. The smile of someone who had nothing to feel guilty about because she'd never promised Elena anything. Something hot and sharp twisted in Elena's chest. Not jealousy. She was surprised to realize she didn't care who Rafe was with. But fury. Pure, clean fury at the realization that he'd probably had this woman waiting the entire time. That their marriage had been a formality he'd already moved past weeks or months ago, while Elena was still trying to salvage something that had never really existed. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and typed a message to Adrian. "Are you free? I could use that coffee you offered." The reply came within seconds. "I'm 20 minutes away. Send me the address." Elena sent the location and leaned against her car, waiting. She didn't look at Rafe again, didn't give him the satisfaction of her attention. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on the cool metal of the car against her back, on the countdown in her head until Adrian arrived. 16 minutes later, a silver Audi pulled into the garage and Adrian Cole stepped out. He saw her immediately and crossed the space between them with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he understood exactly what she needed. "Elena." He said her name like it mattered, like she was someone worth noticing. "You okay?" Adrian was everything Rafe wasn't. Where Rafe was dark and commanding and dangerously beautiful, Adrian was warm and steady and approachable. Sandy hair that curled slightly at the ends, blue eyes that actually looked at her instead of through her, a build that came from weekend runs and playing basketball with friends, not obsessive gym routines and image management. He wore a simple button-down and jeans, no suit required to prove his worth. They'd met 3 months ago at a charity gala Elena had attended alone. Rafe had canceled at the last minute, as usual. Adrian had been there designing the new wing of the children's hospital they were fundraising for. And he'd made her laugh with his stories about arguing with contractors who thought Art Deco belonged in a pediatric ward. He'd asked for her number, she'd given it to him, and slowly, carefully, over coffee dates and gallery visits and long phone conversations, Elena had started to remember what it felt like to be visible. They'd kissed for the first time 2 weeks ago, in his car after dinner, and Elena had cried afterward, not from regret, but from relief that she could still feel something. "I'm fine," Elena managed a real smile. "Better now." Adrian glanced past her toward where Rafe still stood with the blonde woman, and something shifted in his expression, not jealousy, but understanding. He stepped closer to Elena, giving her space to choose, and she made the choice. She kissed him. Not tentatively, the way she had 2 weeks ago. Not carefully, like she was still married in spirit if not in law. But deliberately, fully, the way someone kisses when they're choosing their own life instead of living in someone else's shadow. Adrian responded immediately, his hand coming up to cup her face, gentle but present, the kind of touch that acknowledged she was real and there and deserving of attention. When they broke apart, Elena saw Rafe over Adrian's shoulder. He'd stopped talking. The phone hung forgotten in his hand. He was staring at Elena with an expression she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded, shock bleeding into something darker. The blonde woman was still saying something to him, touching his arm, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was just staring. For the first time in 8 years, Rafael Moretti looked shaken. Elena turned back to Adrian, who was watching her with quiet concern. "Take me somewhere," she said. "Anywhere that isn't here. I know just the place." Adrian opened the passenger door of his car like she was someone worth this kind of simple care. "There's a coffee shop by the river, quiet. Good pastries, we can talk or we can just sit, whatever you need." What she needed was to stop existing in Rafe's orbit. What she needed was to remember that she was more than the ghost of Mrs. Rafael Moretti. She got in the car. As Adrian pulled out of the garage, Elena let herself look back once. Rafe was still standing there, still watching her leave, and for just a moment, one brief, startling moment, he looked lost. "Good," Elena thought. "Now you know how it feels." Sat at a table in the back. Two sat at a table in the back. 2 cappuccinos between them, and Adrian didn't push. Didn't ask for details she wasn't ready to give. Just sat with her while she processed, occasionally refilling her water glass or offering her half his almond croissant. "You want to talk about it?" he finally asked after 20 minutes of comfortable silence. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup and considered. "I thought I'd feel different," she admitted. "After it was final. I thought there'd be relief or grief or something big, but I just feel tired. Divorce is exhausting even when it's the right choice." Adrian's voice was gentle. "You've been carrying this for a long time." 8 years. Elena took a sip of coffee. 8 years of being married to someone who treated me like expensive furniture. Beautiful to look at, useful for appearances, but not actually worth his time or attention. "He's an idiot." That pulled a laugh out of her, unexpected and genuine. "He's a lot of things. Idiot isn't usually one of them." "Then he's an idiot about you specifically." Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Elena, I've known you 3 months, and I've seen more of who you are than he apparently saw in 8 years. That's not you being forgettable. That's him being blind." Elena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "I let myself disappear. I thought if I just became the perfect wife, didn't make demands, didn't complain, he'd eventually see me. But you can't make someone notice you when they've decided you're not worth noticing." Their loss. Adrian reached across the table, and Elena let him take her hand. His touch was warm, solid, real. "Someone else's inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. You know that, right?" Did she? Elena had spent so long defining herself by Rafe's indifference that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be someone's priority. Adrian made her feel visible. He texted back. He showed up when he said he would. He asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. Basic things, fundamental things. Things that should have been the bare minimum but felt revolutionary after years of Rafe's benign neglect. "I'm working on knowing it." Elena squeezed his hand. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't exactly how you wanted to spend your afternoon." "I wanted to spend my afternoon with you." Adrian said it simply, like it was just a fact. "The circumstances don't change that." They stayed until the light outside shifted to late afternoon gold, talking about everything except Rafe. Adrian told her about the community center he was designing in the East Side, how he was fighting to include green space and natural light in a budget that barely covered the basics. Elena told him about the job she'd started applying for, positions at nonprofit organizations, places where she could use the fundraising experience she'd gained as Mrs. Moretti without being defined by it. It was normal. It was nice. It was everything her marriage had never been. When Adrian finally drove her back to the garage to get her car, he walked her all the way to the driver's door. "You gonna be okay?" he asked. "Yeah." Elena surprised herself by meaning it. "I really think I am." He kissed her again, soft and sweet, and this time there were no tears, just gratitude that there were still men in the world who knew how to be present. "Text me when you get home," Adrian said. "And Elena, for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave." She didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted and wrung out and still slightly numb, but she appreciated the sentiment. Elena drove back to the apartment she'd rented 2 months ago. Not the penthouse she'd shared with Rafe, but a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew her as Mrs. Moretti. She made tea. She took a bath. She put on comfortable clothes and curled up on her couch with a book she'd been meaning to read for months. Her phone rang at 8 o'clock. Unknown number. Elena almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Russo?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Patricia Chen from Walsh & Associates. I'm calling regarding your divorce settlement." Elena's stomach dropped. "I thought everything was finalized." "Yes, well." A pause. "Mr. Moretti has filed a motion to contest certain aspects of the settlement. His attorney will be reaching out to your representation tomorrow morning, but I wanted to give you advance notice." The tea in Elena's stomach turned to ice. "Contest what aspects?" "The division of assets, primarily, and the timeline for finalization." Another pause. "Miss Russo, I've been practicing family law for 15 years, and I've never seen Mr. Moretti contest a settlement after signing. This is highly unusual." Elena's hands were shaking. "What does this mean?" "It means the 30-day waiting period may be extended while we litigate. It means your divorce isn't final yet." Patricia Chen's voice gentled slightly. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you were expecting. We'll fight this, of course, but I wanted you to be prepared." After she hung up, Elena sat in the dark living room and tried to make sense of it. Rafe had been the one to push for the divorce. He'd had his lawyers draft the settlement. He'd signed without hesitation. Why would he suddenly contest it now? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Then another. "Who is he, Elena?" And another, "Call me. Tonight." Elena stared at the messages, fury rising in her chest. For 8 years, Rafe couldn't be bothered to come home for dinner, couldn't remember her birthday, couldn't spare 5 minutes for a conversation that wasn't about his schedule or his needs or his empire. But now that she'd walked away, now that she'd kissed someone else, now that she'd dared to choose herself, suddenly he had time. Suddenly he had questions. Suddenly she was worth his attention. She typed a response with shaking hands. "You lost the right to ask me questions when you signed those papers. Leave me alone." The phone rang immediately. Rafe's name on the screen. Elena rejected the call. It rang again. She rejected it again. On the third call she answered, her voice ice. "What? Who is he?" Rafe's voice was rough, unfamiliar. She'd heard him angry before, coldly furious, meticulously controlled, dangerous in the way predators are dangerous. But this was different. This was raw. "That's none of your business." "The hell it isn't. Are you sleeping with him? How long has this been going on?" Elena laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You're unbelievable. You stood there with another woman 15 minutes after our divorce, and you want to know if I'm sleeping with someone?" "That was business." Rafe bit out the words. "Vanessa is a business associate. It's not the same thing." "You're right. It's not." Elena's voice was deadly quiet. "Because I didn't spend 8 years making you feel invisible. I didn't cancel on you 100 times, or treat you like an accessory, or forget you existed the moment you weren't useful. So, no, Rafe, it's not the same thing at all." Silence on the other end. Then, "Elena, don't." Her voice broke despite her best efforts. Don't call me again. Don't contest the settlement. Don't drag this out. You wanted out. You got out. Now let me go. I never said I wanted out. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. Every day for 8 years. Elena was crying now, angry tears she couldn't hold back. I was so alone in that marriage, Rafe. So completely, desperately alone. And you never noticed. Or you noticed and you didn't care. I'm not sure which is worse. Elena, wait. She hung up. The phone rang again, but this time she turned it off completely. Then she sat in the dark and cried for the marriage that had never been, for the woman she'd been when she still believed love could be earned through patience and perfection, for all the years she'd wasted being invisible. When the tears finally stopped, Elena washed her face and made a decision. Whatever Rafe was doing, whatever game he thought he was playing, she wasn't going to let him pull her back into his orbit. She'd survived 8 years of his indifference. She could survive his sudden, inexplicable interest. She was done being Rafael Moretti's ghost. She was finally, completely done. The next morning, Elena met with her lawyer. David Walsh was in his 60s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that came from decades of watching marriages collapse and helping people rebuild. He sat across from Elena in his book-lined office, reading through the contest motion Rafe's legal team had filed. It's aggressive, he finally said. He's challenging the asset division, claiming you're entitled to more than what was originally settled. Elena blinked. What? He wants to give you more. David looked up over his reading glasses. The penthouse, full ownership of the vacation properties, a larger settlement. It's... He trailed off, clearly searching for words. Insane, Elena finished. It's insane. I was going to say unprecedented, but insane works too. David set down the papers. Elena, in my professional opinion, this isn't about money. Men like Rafael Moretti don't suddenly become generous unless they want something. He wants to control me. Elena's voice was flat. He can't stand that I walked away. So now he's using the settlement to drag things out, to keep me tied to him. David nodded slowly. That would be my assessment as well. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I want it over. Elena leaned forward. I don't want his properties or his money or his guilt offerings. I want the original settlement and I want it finalized. We can fight this. It'll take time, probably several months, but we can push for the original terms. David hesitated. Elena, I have to ask, is there any possibility this is genuine? That he's having second thoughts about the divorce? Elena thought about the blonde woman in the garage, about 8 years of canceled plans and empty conversations, about the way Rafe had looked at her in that notary office like she was already gone. If he is, she said quietly, it's only because I'm the first thing he's ever lost that he didn't mean to lose. And that's not love. That's ego. David nodded, something like respect in his eyes. Then we fight. I'll file our response today. Elena left the office feeling slightly steadier. She had a plan. She had representation. She had... Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. Lunch today. There's something I want to talk about. They met at a small Italian place near Adrian's office, tucked into a corner booth where the lunch crowd's chatter provided a buffer of privacy. Adrian looked nervous, his fingers drumming against his water glass. Everything okay? Elena asked. Yeah, Adrian took a breath. I've been thinking about us, about where this is going. Elena's stomach tightened. Okay. I like you, Elena. A lot. These past 3 months have been incredible. Adrian reached across the table for her hand. But I need to know if you're really ready for this. Because last night, when your ex-husband called, when you told me he was contesting the settlement, I realized I might be walking into something more complicated than I'm equipped to handle. It was fair. It was honest. It was exactly the kind of direct communication Elena had been craving for years. I understand, she said quietly. And you're right. This is complicated. Rafe is making it complicated. That's what worries me. Adrian's blue eyes were serious. Elena, I don't want to be the rebound guy. I don't want to be the person you're with just to prove you've moved on. I want to be with you because you choose me, not because you're choosing not to be with him. It's not like that. But even as she said it, Elena wondered if it was entirely true. Had she kissed Adrian in that garage because she wanted him, or because she'd wanted Rafe to see her want someone else? Isn't it? Adrian's voice was gentle, but firm. Be honest with yourself, Elena. Are you over him? Really over him? Elena thought about that moment in the garage when Rafe had looked shaken, the small, ugly satisfaction she'd felt, the way she'd wanted him to hurt the way she'd been hurting. I don't love him anymore, she said finally, but I'm angry, and I'm hurt, and maybe I'm not as over it as I thought I was. Adrian nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. Are you breaking up with me? Elena's voice was smaller than she'd intended. No? Adrian squeezed her hand. But I think maybe we need to slow down. Give you space to really finish this chapter before we try to start a new one. Because, Elena, you deserve someone who's completely present, and I deserve to be with someone who isn't still working through someone else. It hurt, but it was also true. They finished lunch making careful conversation about safe topics. Adrian's projects, Elena's job applications, a movie they both wanted to see. It was pleasant. It was sad. It was the beginning of an ending, even if neither of them wanted to admit it yet. When Adrian walked her to her car, he kissed her forehead instead of her lips. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I just need you to work this out, really work it out. And then, if you still want to see where this goes, I'm here. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She drove home in silence, parked in silence, walked up to her apartment in silence. And when she finally closed the door behind her, she let herself cry again. Not for Rafe this time, but for Adrian. For the possibility of something real that she might be too broken to build yet. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject: Final warning. R. Moretti. Elena's hand shook as she opened it. The message was short, typed instead of dictated, which meant Rafe had written it himself. Elena, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for your time or attention, but there are things you don't understand about the situation, things I need to explain before this goes any further. Please. One conversation, that's all I'm asking. I'll be at the penthouse tonight at 8. If you don't come, I'll know you're done and I'll sign whatever papers Walsh sends over. But if there's any part of you that wants answers, I'll be there. Elena stared at the screen until the words blurred. One conversation. Answers to what questions? Explanations for what situation? She should delete it. She should tell David to push forward with contesting Rafe's contest. She should block Rafe's number and his email and every avenue of contact he had. But 8 years was a long time to be married to someone. And despite everything, despite the loneliness and the anger and the complete destruction of whatever they'd once been, there was still a part of Elena that wanted to understand why. Why he'd married her if he never planned to actually be married to her. Why he'd let her disappear. Why he suddenly cared now that she was gone. Maybe it was closure she needed. Or maybe it was just one last chance to be seen by the man who'd refused to see her for so long. Either way, at 7:45 that evening, Elena found herself standing outside the penthouse they'd shared, key card in hand, trying to decide if she was brave or stupid. She swiped the card. The elevator rose 43 floors in silence, and when the doors opened to the penthouse, to the place that had never quite felt like home, Rafe was waiting. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, wearing a simple black shirt and dark jeans instead of his usual suits. He looked tired, older, more human than she'd seen him in years. You came. His voice was rough, like he'd been expecting the elevator to stay empty. I shouldn't have. Elena stayed near the elevator, maintaining distance. But I want to understand what you're doing, why you're dragging this out. Rafe turned to face her fully, and Elena saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Genuine emotion, raw and unguarded. I'm trying to protect you, he said, from something I should have protected you from a long time ago. And then he told her everything. The city lights stretched out behind Rafe like a constellation of broken promises, and Elena felt her resolve wavering the moment she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. She'd expected the usual Rafael Moretti, controlled, calculated, armored in expensive fabric, and colder indifference. Instead, the man standing before her looked stripped down, almost vulnerable, and that was somehow more dangerous than anything he'd shown her in 8 years. Protect me from what? Elena kept her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Rafe, what are you talking about? He moved away from the windows, closer to her, but still maintaining careful distance, like he understood that one wrong move would send her back into that elevator. There's a federal investigation. RICO charges. They've been building a case for 18 months, and 3 weeks ago they added my name to the indictment. The words hit Elena like cold water. RICO. Racketeering. The kind of charges that turned news into spectacle, that destroyed empires and sent men to prison for decades. She'd always known Rafe operated in gray areas, had always chosen not to look too closely at the source of their wealth. But this? You're telling me this now? Her voice rose despite her best efforts. After the divorce? After everything? I'm telling you now because you need to understand why I kept you at arm's length. Rafe's jaw was tight. Elena, everyone close to me is under scrutiny. Phone records, financial transactions, associates. The feds are looking for leverage, for people they can pressure into testimony. If you were still my wife, actively involved in my life, in my business, they'd come after you. Elena felt the room tilt slightly. So what? You decided to divorce me for my own protection? Is that the story you're selling? No. The word came out hard. I decided to divorce you because you deserved better than being collateral damage in whatever's coming. But I didn't know. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration Elena had rarely seen. I didn't know you'd already moved on, that you'd be with someone else the same day we signed papers. There it was, the real wound beneath all the legal maneuvering and protective justifications. Adrian has nothing to do with this, Elena said coldly. Adrian? Rafe repeated the name like he was tasting poison. How long? That's none of your business. It is when you could be dragging an innocent man into a federal investigation. Rafe's voice sharpened. Elena, everyone connected to me is going to be questioned. Your phone records, your financial accounts, anyone you're in contact with, it's all going to be examined. If you're involved with this man, he needs to know what he's walking into. Elena laughed, a bitter sound. You want to talk about what people are walking into? You married me knowing this could happen. You kept me in the dark for 8 years, made me into the perfect ignorant wife, and now you want credit for protecting me? I never wanted you ignorant. Something raw flashed across Rafe's face. I wanted you safe. Those aren't the same thing. Elena took a step forward, anger overriding caution. You kept me isolated. You canceled on me constantly. You treated me like I was decorative instead of human. And now you're telling me it was all for my protection? That's convenient, Rafe. That's a really convenient rewrite of 8 years of neglect. It wasn't neglect. His voice rose to match hers. It was distance, deliberate distance, because the closer you were to my business, the more danger you were in. Then why marry me at all? The question came out as a cry. If you knew this was coming, if you knew you could never actually let me in, why go through with it? Rafe was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Because I thought I could keep you separate. I thought I could have one part of my life that was clean, that was good, that was... He stopped. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Elena's hands were shaking. I spent 8 years trying to understand what I did wrong, what was so fundamentally flawed about me that my own husband couldn't stand to be in the same room as me for more than an hour at a time. And now you're telling me it was strategy? Protection? You didn't do anything wrong. Rafe looked at her directly, and the intensity in his dark eyes made Elena's breath catch. You were perfect. You were too perfect. And I was terrified that if I let you get too close, you'd become a target. So instead you made me disappear. Elena's voice broke. You made me so invisible that I forgot I existed. Do you have any idea what that felt like? To be married to someone who treated me like an obligation instead of a partner? I know. The admission seemed to cost him. I know what I did to you, and I know sorry doesn't fix it. But Elena, you have to understand, the life I built, the empire, all of it came with costs. I chose those costs. I chose to exist in that world. But you didn't choose it. You chose me, and I had no right to drag you into the consequences. Elena shook her head, trying to process. The settlement. You're contesting it to keep me connected to you, to keep the divorce from being finalized so I can claim spousal privilege if they try to make me testify. Partially. Rafe didn't deny it, but also because the original settlement was intentionally minimal. If this goes to trial, If everything gets frozen by federal seizure, I needed to make sure you had assets in your name. Property. Accounts they can't touch. The contest is about moving those assets before everything locks down. It was practical, strategic, exactly the kind of calculated move Rafael Moretti was known for. And it was also, Elena realized with a sinking feeling, probably genuine. He was protecting her the only way he knew how, with lawyers and legal maneuvering and careful distance. You should have told me. Elena's voice was quieter now, exhaustion creeping in. Before we got married, during, any point in the last 8 years you should have been honest with me. Would you have stayed? Rafe asked. If I'd told you the truth about what I was involved in, about the risks, about the possibility that everything could collapse, would you have stayed? Elena wanted to say no immediately, wanted to tell him that she would have run the moment she understood the danger. But the truth was more complicated. She'd been 24 when they met, working as a fundraising coordinator for a nonprofit, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates and student loan debt. Rafe had been magnetic, powerful, utterly certain of himself and his place in the world. He'd made her feel chosen, special, like she was someone worth noticing. I don't know, she admitted, but I deserved the choice. You're right. Rafe moved closer, just 2 steps, but it felt significant. You deserved honesty. You deserved a real partner, not someone who kept you at a distance and called it protection. I failed you, Elena, completely. It was the first real apology she'd heard from him in years, and it hurt worse than the neglect had, because at least when he was indifferent, she could hate him cleanly. This raw acknowledgement, this glimpse of the man he might have been if he'd chosen differently, was infinitely more painful. Why now? Elena asked. Why tell me all this now when it's over? Because it's not over. Rafe's voice was rough. The investigation, the charges, the fallout, it's just beginning. And when it hits, when my name is all over the news and federal agents are knocking on doors, you're going to be questioned. They're going to ask about me, about our marriage, about what you knew and when you knew it, and I need you to be prepared. Elena felt cold spreading through her chest. What do I know? I don't know anything about your business. Exactly, and that's what you tell them. But Elena, Rafe hesitated and she saw real fear in his expression. They're going to try to pressure you. They're going to imply you were complicit, that you benefited from illegal activity, that you could face charges yourself if you don't cooperate. It's intimidation tactics, standard procedure. But you need to know it's coming. This is insane, Elena pressed her hands to her face. This is completely insane. I signed divorce papers this morning. I'm supposed to be starting over, moving on, building a life that's mine. And instead, I'm standing here learning that I might be questioned by federal investigators about crimes I didn't even know were being committed. I know. Rafe's voice was gentle in a way she'd forgotten he could be. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry, Elena, but I need you to understand. Whatever they ask you, whatever they threaten, the truth is your best protection. You weren't involved. You didn't know. You can't testify to something you were never part of. Elena dropped her hands and looked at him directly. And what about you? What happens to you when this all comes out? Something flickered in Rafe's expression. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. I knew the risks when I made my choices. I'll deal with the consequences. Prison, Elena said it flatly. You're talking about prison. Possibly. Probably. Rafe's jaw tightened. My lawyers are working on a defense, but the evidence is substantial. I'm not naive about how this ends. The reality of it settled over Elena like ash. Rafael Moretti, powerful, untouchable, always 3 moves ahead, was facing the kind of destruction that left nothing standing. And despite everything he'd put her through, despite the loneliness and the anger and the years of feeling invisible, she felt something twist in her chest that might have been grief. I should go. Elena moved toward the elevator. This is too much. I need to process. Wait. Rafe crossed the distance between them quickly, and Elena's hand was on the elevator button when he spoke again. The man you're seeing, Adrian, does he know about any of this? Elena turned, meeting his eyes. He knows we're divorced. He knows you contested the settlement. That's all he needs to know. Elena, If you care about him at all, you should end it. Rafe's voice was urgent. Before the indictment becomes public, before his name gets connected to yours, and by extension to mine, give him a chance to walk away clean. You don't get to tell me what to do with my personal life. Elena's voice was steel. Not anymore. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect someone you care about from getting dragged into my mess. Rafe ran a hand over his face. You want to hate me? Fine. You've earned that right. But don't let that hate make you reckless with other people's lives. The elevator dinged behind her, doors sliding open. I'll think about what you said, Elena said quietly. About the investigation, about being prepared. But Rafe, you don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to pretend the last 8 years were about protection when they felt like abandonment. Whatever your reasons were, the impact was the same. I was alone, and you let me be alone. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the ground floor button. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Rafe standing in the middle of the penthouse they'd shared, looking more lost than she'd ever seen him. The ride down felt longer than the ride up. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. Hope your evening is going well. Thinking about you? Elena stared at the message, Rafe's warning echoing in her mind. If you care about him at all, you should end it. Give him a chance to walk away clean. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, Can we talk tomorrow? Something's come up. His reply was immediate. Of course. Everything okay? Not really, but it will be. She hoped that was true. Elena drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning through everything Rafe had told her. RICO charges, federal investigation, testimony. She'd been so focused on escaping her marriage that she hadn't considered what she might be escaping into. The divorce that was supposed to set her free might have just tethered her to Rafe's downfall in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Her apartment felt too quiet when she finally walked in. She made tea she didn't drink and sat on her couch staring at nothing while her phone buzzed with increasingly concerned messages from Adrian. Finally, around midnight, she sent him one more text. I need to be honest with you about something. Can we meet for breakfast? I'll explain everything. She didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Instead, she sat up researching RICO statutes and federal racketeering cases until her eyes burned and the legal jargon started to blur together. One thing became crystal clear. If Rafe was indicted, the investigation would consume everyone in his orbit. Associates, employees, family members, and ex-wives who'd signed divorce papers less than 48 hours ago. The next morning, Elena met Adrian at a diner near his office. He was already there when she arrived, coffee ordered, concern written clearly across his face. Talk to me, he said as soon as she slid into the booth across from him. What's going on? Elena took a breath and told him everything. The investigation, the charges, Rafe's explanation for the contested settlement, the possibility that she'd be questioned, that anyone connected to her might be scrutinized. She watched Adrian's expression shift from concern to shock to something harder to read. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So your ex-husband is potentially facing federal racketeering charges, Adrian finally said, and you might be called to testify. Yes. And he warned you that anyone you're involved with could be questioned as part of the investigation. Yes. Adrian leaned back against the vinyl booth, processing. That's a lot, Elena. I know, and I understand if this is too much. Elena's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. If you want to walk away, I won't blame you. This isn't what you signed up for. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. He studied her face, his blue eyes searching. But I'm not sure walking away is that simple either. We've been seeing each other for 3 months. My name is probably already in your phone records, your credit card statements from dinners we've had. If they're really doing a comprehensive investigation, then you're already connected. Elena felt sick. I'm sorry. I should have ended this the moment Rafe told me. I should have... Hey, Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand. You didn't do anything wrong. Your ex-husband made choices that led to this situation. You're just trying to navigate the fallout. But I'm dragging you into it. You're not dragging me. I'm choosing to stay informed. Adrian squeezed her hand gently. But, Elena, I need to ask. Is there any possibility you knew about whatever he was involved in? Anything that could make you complicit? The question stung, but it was fair. No, I mean, I knew his business wasn't entirely legitimate. You don't build that kind of wealth through completely legal channels. But the specifics, the details, he kept me completely separate from all of it. Kept you in the dark. He called it protection. Elena's voice was bitter. I called it neglect. Turns out it might have been both. Adrian was quiet again, and Elena could see him working through the implications, weighing his options. This was the moment, she realized. This was where he'd decide if she was worth the risk or if the smart play was to cut his losses and run. I need some time, he finally said. Not because I want to leave, but because this is serious. Federal investigations, potential testimony, having my life examined, I need to think about what that means for me. For my career, for my family. I understand. Elena pulled her hand back, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Take whatever time you need. I'm not abandoning you. Adrian's voice was firm. But I'm also not going to pretend this doesn't change things. We went from dating to federal investigation in 24 hours. That's a lot to process. They finished breakfast making stilted conversation, and when Adrian walked her to her car, he kissed her cheek instead of her lips. It felt like goodbye, even though neither of them said the word. Elena spent the rest of the day calling her lawyer and trying to understand what came next. David Walsh was blunt. If there's an indictment coming, you need to be prepared for a media storm, he said. Your name will be mentioned. Your marriage will be dissected. And yes, you'll likely be questioned by federal investigators. The spousal privilege complicates things since you're in the process of divorcing, but it's not a complete shield. What do I do? Elena felt overwhelmed. You tell the truth, you cooperate fully, and you don't lie to federal agents under any circumstances. David's voice was serious. Elena, I'm going to recommend you retain a criminal defense attorney. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you need someone who specializes in federal investigations advising you through this process. A criminal defense attorney, for a woman whose biggest crime had been trusting the wrong man. That evening, Elena's phone rang with another unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Russo, this is Special Agent Marcus Chen with the FBI. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you regarding your relationship with Rafael Moretti. Elena's blood went cold. I need to speak with my attorney first. Of course. That's your right. Agent Chen's voice was professionally neutral. But, Ms. Russo, I should tell you, cooperation at this stage tends to work in people's favor. The sooner we can have a conversation, the better. I'll have my attorney contact you. Elena's voice was shaking. I'm not answering any questions without legal representation. Understood. We'll be in touch. The call ended, and Elena immediately dialed David Walsh, then spent the next hour on the phone with him and a criminal defense attorney named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in federal cases. Rebecca was direct and no-nonsense. Don't talk to anyone about this case without me present, she said. Not friends, not family, and definitely not Rafael Moretti. Every conversation you have from this point forward could potentially be used in court. Do you understand? Yes. Good. I'll coordinate with Agent Chen to schedule a formal interview. In the meantime, I need you to compile documentation of your financial independence from Moretti. Bank accounts in your name only. Credit cards you pay yourself. Any evidence that you maintained separate finances. We had separate accounts, Elena said. I insisted on it. I always wanted to maintain some independence. That's going to help your case significantly. Rebecca sounded relieved. It establishes a pattern of separation between you and his business dealings. We can work with that. After the call ended, Elena sat in the growing darkness of her apartment and tried to understand how her life had spiraled so completely out of control. 48 hours ago, she'd signed divorce papers and thought she was finally free. Now, she had a criminal defense attorney, and the FBI wanted to question her about crimes she didn't commit and barely understood. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I heard Chen called you. Don't let them intimidate you. Tell the truth and you'll be fine. Elena stared at the message, fury rising in her chest. Even now, even from the center of his own impending destruction, Rafe was trying to manage her, to control the narrative, to tell her what to do. She typed back with shaking hands. Stop contacting me. I have attorneys. I don't need your advice. The response came immediately. I'm trying to help. You've helped enough. Stay away from me. She blocked the number, then called Rebecca Torres back. Rafe just texted me, she said, telling me not to be intimidated by the FBI. Is that a problem? Rebecca swore quietly. It could be construed as witness tampering. Forward me the messages and block his number immediately. And Elena? I'm serious about the no contact rule. If he reaches out again through any channel, you document it and send it directly to me. Don't respond. I already blocked him. Good. Keep it that way. That night, Elena lay awake thinking about everything she'd lost in the span of 2 days. Her marriage, which was already dead but now felt like it was being publicly autopsied. Her privacy. Federal agents would be combing through her life looking for evidence she didn't have. Adrian, who was probably smart enough to walk away before he got dragged into this mess. And her anonymity. Once Rafe's indictment became public, her name would be linked to his forever. She'd wanted freedom. Instead, she'd gotten federal scrutiny and legal bills, and the suffocating feeling of being trapped in someone else's consequences. Her phone lit up with a text from Adrian. I've been thinking about what you told me. Can we talk? Elena's heart jumped. Now? If you're awake, I can come by? She gave him her address, then spent 15 minutes trying to make herself look less exhausted and more composed. When Adrian arrived, he looked serious, but not angry, which Elena took as a good sign. I talked to my lawyer, he said as soon as she let him in, about the investigation, about what it might mean for me if we keep seeing each other. Elena's stomach dropped. And he said that unless I was directly involved in Moretti's business, which I'm not, there's no legal reason why we can't continue our relationship. Adrian sat down on her couch, and Elena sat beside him. But he also said that federal investigations can get invasive. Phone records, financial statements, interviews with associates. If we stay together, I need to be prepared for that level of scrutiny. I understand if that's too much. Elena's voice was quiet. It is too much. Adrian turned to face her. It's way too much for 3 months of dating. It's the kind of complication that makes people run in the opposite direction. Elena nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. Okay. But, Adrian reached for her hand, I also can't shake the feeling that walking away now, when you're dealing with all this, would make me exactly like your ex-husband, someone who abandons you when things get difficult. Adrian, you don't owe me. I know I don't owe you. But I like you, Elena. A lot. And I think there could be something real here if we had a chance to build it without all this external pressure. He took a breath. So here's what I'm proposing. We slow down, like I said before. We don't make any big commitments or declarations, but I don't walk away either. I stay, and we see where this goes, and we deal with the investigation as it comes. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Are you sure? No? Adrian smiled slightly, but I'm sure I don't want to give up on this without trying. So yeah, I'm in. As long as you promise to be completely honest with me. No more surprises. I promise. Elena squeezed his hand. And Adrian, thank you for not running. Yet, he said wryly. Thank you for not running yet. They spent the evening talking through logistics, what the investigation might entail, how they'd handle media attention if it came, what boundaries they needed to maintain. It was practical and unromantic and exactly what Elena needed. When Adrian left around midnight, he kissed her at the door. A real kiss, not a goodbye kiss. And Elena felt the first genuine hope she'd had in days. Maybe she couldn't control what happened with the investigation. Maybe her life was about to become uncomfortably public. Maybe everything with Rafe was going to get worse before it got better. But she had Adrian choosing to stay. She had lawyers protecting her interests. And she had herself, stronger than she'd been 2 days ago, clearer about what she wanted, more certain of her own worth. The next morning, Elena's phone rang at 7 a.m. David Walsh. The indictment just became public, he said without preamble. Rafael Moretti has been formally charged with racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. It's going to be all over the news in about an hour. Elena turned on her television and watched her ex-husband's mugshot flash across the screen. The man who'd always been so carefully composed, so meticulously in control, looked tired and grim in the booking photo. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Prominent businessman Rafael Moretti arrested in federal racketeering case. Her phone started ringing almost immediately. Unknown numbers. Reporters, probably. Elena silenced them all and called Rebecca Torres. I'm getting calls, she said. Don't answer any of them. Don't issue any statements. The best thing you can do right now is stay completely silent. Rebecca's voice was firm. I've scheduled your FBI interview for next week. Until then, lay low. Laying low proved impossible. By noon, there were reporters outside Elena's apartment building. By evening, her name was trending on social media. Rafael Moretti's ex-wife, mystery woman in Moretti case. Speculation about what she knew and when she knew it. Adrian called that afternoon. Are you okay? I saw the news. I'm surviving. Elena was watching from her window as reporters camped out on the sidewalk. I can't leave my apartment without cameras in my face. Come stay with me. The offer was immediate. They don't know my address. You can have some privacy while this initial media storm passes. Elena hesitated. Adrian, that's going to make you more connected to all this. I'm already connected. Might as well be useful. His voice was warm. Pack a bag. I'll pick you up from the parking garage in 20 minutes. Elena packed quickly and slipped out through the building's rear entrance, avoiding the media congregation at the front. Adrian's car was waiting, and he drove her to his townhouse in a quiet neighborhood across town. Guest room is yours, he said as he helped her with her bag. Stay as long as you need. That night, Elena sat in Adrian's guest room and watched the news coverage of Rafe's arrest. They had footage of him being led into federal court, his usual confidence stripped away by handcuffs and the flash of cameras. His lawyer read a statement declaring his innocence and intention to fight the charges vigorously, and then they showed clips of Elena, or rather, of the ex-wife. Paparazzi photos from her attempts to leave her apartment. Speculation about their marriage, their divorce, whether she'd cooperate with investigators. A legal analyst saying that ex-spouses often made valuable witnesses in RICO cases. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that had somehow gotten through her blocks. I'm sorry you're being dragged through this. You deserve better. R. Elena deleted it without responding. Rafe had apologized plenty. What she needed now wasn't his regret. It was his silence. The FBI interview happened on a Tuesday morning in a sterile conference room with Rebecca Torres seated beside Elena and Agent Chen across from them. There was another agent present, a woman named Jennifer Park, who took notes while Chen asked questions. They were methodical, professional. They asked about Elena's knowledge of Rafe's business operations, about their finances, about specific transactions and properties and associates. Elena answered truthfully. She didn't know. She wasn't involved. She'd been kept deliberately separate from that entire aspect of his life. Mrs. Moretti. Miss Russo, Elena corrected quietly. Ms. Russo. Agent Chen's expression didn't change. You maintained separate bank accounts from your husband throughout your marriage. Yes. That's unusual for a couple married 8 years. I wanted financial independence, Elena said. I never wanted to be completely dependent on anyone. Agent Park looked up from her notes. Did your husband ever ask you to make purchases on his behalf? Transfer money between accounts? Accept deliveries or packages? No, never. The questions continued for over an hour. By the end, Elena felt wrung out and exhausted. Rebecca walked her to the parking garage afterward. You did well, she said. You were honest and consistent. That's what they're looking for. Do you think they believe me? Elena asked. I think they believe you didn't know specifics about his operations. Whether they try to pressure you for more information later, that remains to be seen. Rebecca's expression was serious. But Elena, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this is just the beginning. If this goes to trial, you could be called as a witness. And if Moretti's lawyers think you have information that could help his defense, they'll try to force me to testify. Exactly. Elena drove back to Adrian's place feeling like she was drowning in legal complexities she'd never wanted to understand. When she got there, Adrian had dinner waiting. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but it was exactly what she needed. How'd it go? He asked. As well as could be expected. Elena sank into a chair at his kitchen table. They don't think I'm complicit, but they don't think I'm useless either. Adrian served her food and sat across from her. What happens now? We wait. For the trial. For more subpoenas. For whatever comes next in this nightmare. Elena picked at her pasta. I'm sorry you're stuck in the middle of this. I'm not stuck. I'm choosing to be here. Adrian's voice was gentle. There's a difference. And for the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, Elena believed someone when they said they were choosing her. That choice became harder to sustain with each passing week. Elena stayed at Adrian's townhouse for 3 days before the guilt became unbearable. Not guilt over leaving Rafe, but guilt over turning Adrian's peaceful life into a fortress against media attention. Reporters had figured out the connection within 48 hours, and suddenly Adrian's morning commute included dodging questions shouted from sidewalks and his office reception fielding calls from tabloid journalists. I should go back to my place, Elena said on the 4th morning, watching Adrian check his phone for the 3rd time during breakfast. This isn't fair to you. The media will follow you wherever you go. Adrian set down his phone deliberately. At least here we're dealing with it together. But together was becoming strained. Elena could see it in the careful way Adrian chose his words now, in the way he'd started closing his office door for phone calls, in the slight hesitation before he kissed her goodbye each morning. He was still choosing her, but the choice was costing him more than either of them had anticipated. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. Elena was working from Adrian's home office. She'd taken a temporary leave from her nonprofit job to avoid bringing media scrutiny to their donors when her phone rang with a number she recognized. Rebecca Torres. "We have a problem," Rebecca said without preamble. "Moretti's legal team just filed a motion to compel your testimony at trial. They're arguing that your knowledge of his legitimate business operations is relevant to establishing his defense." Elena's stomach dropped. "I thought spousal privilege protects confidential marital communications. Yes, but they're not asking about private conversations. They're asking about business dinners you attended, charity events where deals were discussed, social gatherings with associates, things that happened in public or semi-public settings." Rebecca's voice was tight. "And because your divorce isn't finalized yet, the privilege question gets complicated." "What does this mean?" "It means Moretti's lawyers are going to drag you into this trial whether you want to be there or not. And Elena, I need you to understand something. If you're called as a defense witness, anything you say could be used to help him. But if you refuse to cooperate or if your testimony contradicts the prosecution's case, they could come after you for obstruction." Elena felt the walls closing in. "So I'm trapped. Either I help Rafe or I risk federal charges myself." "Not exactly. You can testify truthfully about what you observed without advocating for either side, but it's going to be a tightrope walk." Rebecca paused. "There's something else. The prosecution has also expressed interest in calling you as a witness. They think your testimony about Moretti's behavior patterns and financial separation could support their case for deliberate compartmentalization of illegal activities." "Both sides want me to testify?" Elena's voice rose. "How is that even possible?" "Because you're the ex-wife, you have a unique perspective that both sides think they can use." Rebecca's tone gentled slightly. "Elena, I'm going to be very direct with you. This trial is going to be ugly. It's going to be public, and you're going to be caught in the middle of it no matter what you do. The best we can hope for is to minimize the damage and keep you from facing any charges yourself." After the call ended, Elena sat staring at her laptop screen without seeing it. The article she'd been reading, something about nonprofit grant applications, blurred into meaningless text. She was going to have to testify. She was going to have to sit in a courtroom and answer questions about Rafe, about their marriage, about things she'd spent 8 years trying not to see too clearly. And both sides would be trying to use her words as weapons. Adrian came home that evening to find Elena sitting in the dark living room, her laptop abandoned on the coffee table. "Hey!" He turned on a lamp, and Elena blinked at the sudden brightness. "What happened?" She told him everything about the motions to compel, about being caught between the defense and prosecution, about the impossibility of her situation. Adrian listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I think you should talk to him," Adrian finally said. Elena stared. "What?" "Rafe. I think you should talk to him directly about this." Adrian sat down beside her, and his expression was serious. "Look, I hate saying this. I hate that he's still controlling your life from the center of his own disaster. But Elena, if both sides are going to call you as a witness, you need to understand what you're actually being asked to testify about. And the only person who can give you that full picture is Rafe himself." My lawyer said no contact. Your lawyer said no contact because she was worried about witness tampering. But this is different. This is you trying to understand the scope of what you might be forced to testify about. Adrian took her hand. I'm not saying trust him. I'm not saying believe whatever story he tells you. But I am saying you need all the information before you walk into that courtroom. Elena wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. She'd spent 8 years deliberately not asking questions about Rafe's business. Now she was being forced to answer questions about it, and she didn't even know what the questions would be. If I do this, she said slowly, if I talk to him, it doesn't mean I'm on his side. I know, Adrian squeezed her hand, but it might mean you're better prepared to protect yourself. Elena called Rebecca Torres the next morning and explained what she wanted to do. Absolutely not. Rebecca's response was immediate. Elena, any conversation you have with Moretti could be discoverable. Both sides could subpoena you about what was discussed. It's a terrible idea. What if I have my attorney present? What if it's an official meeting with both legal teams? Rebecca was quiet. That's different. That would be a proffer session, preliminary discussions about potential testimony. Those conversations typically have some protection. She paused. But Elena, are you sure you want to do this? Sitting across from Moretti, hearing his version of events, it's going to be hard. Everything about this is hard. Elena's voice was steady. At least this way I'm choosing to face it instead of having it sprung on me in court. Rebecca arranged the meeting for the following Monday at a neutral conference room in her law firm's office building. Rafe would attend with his lead attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Marion Voss who had a reputation for decimating prosecution witnesses. Rebecca would be there for Elena. And Agent Chen had been notified as required by law, though the FBI wasn't sending a representative. Elena spent the weekend at Adrian's place trying to prepare mentally for seeing Rafe again. It had been 3 weeks since that night in the penthouse. 3 weeks of watching his arrest and arraignment and bail hearing play out on national news. She'd seen him only through television screens and newspaper photos, and the distance had made it easier to maintain her anger. Now she was going to have to sit across a table from him and discuss the ruins of everything they'd built together. Adrian drove her to the meeting Monday morning. He couldn't come inside. This was strictly attorneys and principals. But he walked her to the building entrance. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Elena straightened her shoulders. But thank you for reminding me I have a choice. The conference room was sterile and intimidating, all glass and steel and uncomfortable chairs. Rebecca was already there, reviewing documents. Marion Voss arrived moments later with an assistant carrying 3 banker's boxes of files. And then Rafe walked in. He looked different, thinner maybe, or just worn down by the weight of federal charges and constant legal preparation. He wore a suit, but not one of his usual power pieces. Something softer, more approachable, probably chosen by Marion to make him look sympathetic. When his eyes met Elena's, something flickered in his expression that looked almost like pain. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Marion said, taking control immediately. Ms. Russo, we appreciate your willingness to discuss potential testimony. I want to be clear from the outset. Nothing said in this room constitutes legal advice from our firm to you, and you should rely entirely on your own counsel's guidance. Understood. Elena's voice was cool. Marion opened one of the boxes and pulled out a timeline document. The prosecution's case centers on a series of real estate transactions between 2019 and 2024. They allege that Mr. Moretti used these transactions to launder money from illegal gambling operations and loan sharking activities. What we need to establish is that Mr. Moretti maintained legitimate business interests that fully accounted for his income and assets. I don't know anything about his business interests, Elena said, legitimate or otherwise. You attended business dinners, charity galas, social events with his associates. Marion's tone was patient, like she was explaining something simple to a child. You observed his behavior in professional contexts. That observation is valuable testimony. Testimony saying what exactly? Marion pulled out another document. That Mr. Moretti conducted himself as a legitimate businessman, that his associates were reputable professionals. That the events you attended were standard networking and philanthropic activities, not criminal conspiracy. Elena looked at Rebecca, who gave a slight nod. Answer truthfully. Some of his associates were reputable. Elena said slowly, but some of them made me uncomfortable. Men who talked too loudly about money and power. Women who looked scared of their partners. I didn't ask questions because I learned early in our marriage that Rafe didn't appreciate my opinions about his business relationships. Rafe flinched. Marion's expression didn't change. Did you ever witness illegal activity at any of these events? Marion asked. No. Did Mr. Moretti ever discuss illegal activities in your presence? No. Did he ever ask you to participate in transactions that seemed questionable or unusual? No. He kept me completely separate from his business. Elena met Rafe's eyes directly. That was the whole problem with our marriage. He kept me separate from everything. Marion made notes. Ms. Russo, I need you to understand something. The prosecution is going to paint a picture of Mr. Moretti as a criminal who deliberately isolated you to maintain plausible deniability. If you testify that he was distant and secretive, you're supporting their narrative. I'm not here to support anyone's narrative. Elena's voice hardened. I'm here to tell the truth. And the truth is that Rafe was distant and secretive. Maybe that was to protect me, or maybe that was just who he is. But either way, it's what happened. Rebecca spoke up for the first time. Ms. Voss, my client has been very clear that she will testify truthfully about her observations and experiences. If that testimony doesn't serve your defense strategy, that's not her concern. Marion smiled thinly. Of course, we're simply trying to understand what her testimony will entail. She turned back to Elena. Let me ask you this. During your marriage, did you ever lack for financial resources? No. Did Mr. Moretti provide for you generously? Financially, yes, but not emotionally. Marion said it like a statement, not a question. No, not emotionally. And that's why you divorced him. Elena hesitated. This felt like a trap, but she couldn't see the mechanism. Yes, among other reasons. Marion made another note. So to be clear, you're divorcing Mr. Moretti not because you discovered criminal activity, but because he failed to meet your emotional needs in the marriage. That's reductive, but essentially accurate. Thank you. That's helpful context. Marion pulled out another document. Now, let's discuss specific events. Do you remember a charity gala at the Metropolitan Club in March 2022? The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Marion walked Elena through dozens of events, asking about who attended, what was discussed, how Rafe behaved. Most of it Elena didn't remember clearly. 8 years of identical fundraisers and business dinners had blurred together into a monotonous parade of small talk and forced smiles. But Marion was meticulous, pulling out photos and guest lists and social media posts to jog Elena's memory. Rafe barely spoke. He sat at the end of the table watching Elena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Occasionally, Marion would ask him to clarify a detail, which associate was which, what business deal was being discussed, but mostly he just watched. Finally, Marion closed her last folder. I think that gives us a clear picture of Ms. Russo's potential testimony. Rebecca, we'll need to coordinate with your office about timing and preparation. Understood. Rebecca gathered her own materials. Elena, we should go. But as Elena stood to leave, Rafe spoke for the first time. Can I have a moment? His voice was rough, unused. Just a moment, with Rebecca present. Marion looked like she wanted to object, but Rebecca nodded slightly. One moment. I'll be right outside the door. The attorneys filed out, leaving Elena and Rafe alone in the glass-walled conference room. Elena stayed standing, maintaining distance. Thank you for doing this, Rafe said quietly. I know how hard this must be. You don't know anything about how hard this is. Elena's voice was sharp. You created this situation. I'm just trying to survive it. I know. Rafe stood as well, but didn't move closer. Elena, I need you to understand, whatever you say on that stand, whatever testimony you give, I'm not going to resent you for it. Tell the truth. Protect yourself. That's all I want. Since when do you care what I want? I've always cared. The words came out raw. I just didn't know how to show it without putting you in danger. Elena laughed bitterly. You keep saying that, like distance and neglect were the same as protection, like making me invisible was some kind of gift. It wasn't a gift. It was cowardice. Rafe ran a hand through his hair. a gesture of frustration she recognized from years of watching him from across rooms. I told myself I was keeping you safe, but the truth is I was too much of a coward to give you the choice, to tell you the truth and let you decide if you wanted to stay. You're right. You were a coward. Elena felt tears threatening and blinked them back. But knowing that now doesn't change the 8 years I spent feeling like I didn't matter. You mattered. Rafe's voice broke slightly. You were the only thing in my entire life that mattered, and I destroyed it because I didn't know how to love someone without controlling them. The admission hung in the air between them. Elena wanted to stay angry, wanted to maintain the clean fury that had sustained her through the divorce and the investigation. But looking at Rafe now, stripped of his usual armor, facing prison and public humiliation, she felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that, might never be ready for that. But understanding, maybe. A recognition that they'd both been trapped in a marriage neither of them knew how to fix. I saw you, she said quietly, in that garage after we signed the papers, with that blonde woman. You looked happy, lighter, like being free of me was a relief. Rafe's expression crumpled. That was Vanessa Chen. She's Marion's associate. She was briefing me about the investigation timeline. He took a shaky breath. I was laughing because she'd just told me a story about her kid getting suspended from school for starting a philosophical debate about whether detention was a violation of human rights. It was the first moment in months I wasn't thinking about the indictment or the divorce or... He stopped. And then I saw you, kissing someone else, looking at him the way you used to look at me, back before I ruined everything, and I realized what I'd lost. You didn't lose me, Rafe. You never had me. Elena's voice was steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. You had a wife who was so desperate to be seen that she made herself smaller and smaller trying to fit into the spaces you left open. That's not love. That's not a marriage. That's just two people existing in proximity and calling it a relationship. I know. Rafe's own eyes were wet. And I'm so sorry. For all of it. For every canceled dinner and forgotten anniversary and moment I chose my empire over my wife. I'm sorry, Elena. The door opened. Rebecca stuck her head in. Time's up. Elena, we need to go. Elena nodded, gathering her things with shaking hands. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back at Rafe one more time. I hope you survive this, she said quietly. Not because I forgive you, but because I don't want to spend the rest of my life defined by being the widow of a man who died in prison. I want both of us to have the chance to become something other than this disaster. Then she walked out, leaving Rafe standing alone in the conference room. Adrian was waiting in the parking garage, leaning against his car with 2 coffee cups. He handed one to Elena without asking if she needed it, and she took it gratefully. How bad? He asked. Worse than I expected. Better than I feared. Elena took a long sip of coffee, letting the warmth steady her. His lawyer is going to try to use me to humanize him, make him look like a devoted husband instead of a criminal. Are you okay with that? Elena considered. I'm going to tell the truth. If the truth makes him look human, that's not my problem. But I'm not going to lie to protect him either. They drove back to Adrian's place in silence. When they got inside, Elena finally let herself collapse on the couch, exhausted by the emotional weight of the morning. Adrian sat beside her. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you still love him? Adrian's voice was careful, neutral. Not whether you want to be with him, just do you still have feelings for him? Elena thought about Rafe's raw apology, about the pain in his eyes when he talked about watching her kiss Adrian, about 8 years of marriage to a man who'd never quite let her in. I don't know, she admitted. I'm angry at him. I'm hurt by him. I'm exhausted by him. But do I still feel something? Maybe. Maybe that's just what happens when you spend 8 years of your life with someone, even if those years were mostly lonely. She turned to look at Adrian directly. Does that answer scare you? Terrifies me. Adrian smiled slightly. But I appreciate the honesty. I don't want to be with Rafe, Elena said firmly. Even if he somehow walks away from this trial a free man, even if he transforms into someone capable of actual emotional presence, we're done. That marriage is over. I'm just not sure all the feelings are over yet. Adrian nodded slowly. Okay, I can work with that. As long as you're honest with me about where your head is. I promise. Elena leaned against him, grateful for his steadiness. Adrian, why are you still here? Really? This is so much more complicated than you signed up for. Because I think you're worth complicated. Adrian put his arm around her shoulders. And because I've spent enough time alone to know that finding someone real, someone who's honest even when it's hard, is rare. So yeah, this is messier than I expected. But I'm not ready to walk away from the possibility of us just because your ex-husband is facing federal charges. Elena kissed him, pouring gratitude and affection and hope into it. When they broke apart, Adrian was smiling. That, he said, is definitely worth complicated. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal preparation and mounting media attention. Rafe's trial date was set for late September, which gave both sides time to build their cases and prepare witnesses. Elena met with Rebecca twice more to go over potential testimony, practicing answers to hostile questions, and learning how to navigate the minefield of cross-examination. The media attention intensified as the trial approached. Tabloids ran speculative pieces about Elena's role in Rafe's empire, complete with photos of her at charity events and wild theories about what she knew and when. One particularly vicious columnist suggested she was complicit in everything and had orchestrated the divorce to escape prosecution. Another painted her as a naive victim of a predatory older man. Neither narrative felt true. Elena was neither complicit nor naive. She was just a woman who'd made the mistake of loving someone who didn't know how to love her back. Adrian's patience started showing cracks around week 2. His firm's senior partners called him in for a conversation about the media attention and whether it was affecting his professional reputation. One of his ongoing projects, a museum commission he'd been working toward for years, was suddenly put on hold pending review. And his mother called, worried and accusatory, asking why he was dating a woman involved in a federal criminal case. I'm not involved, Elena protested when Adrian told her about the call. I'm a witness. It's not the same thing. Try telling that to my mother. Adrian's voice had an edge Elena hadn't heard before. She's convinced you're going to drag me down with you. Maybe she's right. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Maybe I am dragging you down. Don't. Adrian stopped her. Don't make this easier by playing the martyr. If I want out, I'll tell you, but I don't get to blame you for my choice to stay. But the strain was there, evident in the way Adrian had started working late at the office, in the careful politeness that had crept into their conversations, in the growing silences that felt less comfortable and more loaded with things unsaid. The breaking point came on a Friday evening, 3 weeks before the trial. Elena was cooking dinner at Adrian's place, something simple, just pasta and vegetables, when Adrian's doorbell rang. He answered it while Elena stirred sauce, and she heard raised voices from the hallway. When Adrian came back into the kitchen, he looked grim. A man followed him, tall, expensive suit, the kind of predatory confidence that made Elena's skin crawl. Miss Russo. The man smiled like a shark. I'm Detective Lawrence Vance. I work with the Organized Crime Task Force investigating Rafael Moretti. Elena's hand tightened on the spoon. I've already spoken with the FBI. I know. I've read your transcript. Vance pulled out a business card and set it on the counter. I'm here to offer you a different option. Elena doesn't have to talk to you without her lawyer present, Adrian said sharply. I'm aware of her rights. Vance's smile didn't waver. But I thought she might want to hear what I have to say before she makes that call. Well, Rebecca had warned Elena about this. Investigators showing up unannounced, trying to catch witnesses off guard, fishing for statements that could be used in court. The proper response was to refuse to engage and call her attorney immediately, but curiosity overrode caution. What option? Protection. Vance leaned against the counter, casual. Ms. Russo, we know you're planning to testify about your observations during your marriage, but what if I told you we could offer you immunity in exchange for something more substantial? I don't need immunity. I haven't done anything wrong. Not yet. Vance's eyes were cold. But you're aware that federal investigations tend to expand. We're looking at money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy. And Ms. Russo, you lived in a penthouse purchased with potentially illegal funds. You wore jewelry bought with that money. You benefited directly from criminal activity. Elena felt her face drain of color. You're threatening me. I'm informing you of your legal exposure. Vance straightened. But here's the thing. If you're willing to cooperate more fully to really help us build a comprehensive case against Moretti, we can protect you from any potential charges, full immunity, clean slate. Get out. Adrian's voice was low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now or I'm calling the police. I am the police. Vance didn't move, and I'm offering Miss Russo a lifeline. Think about it carefully before you reject it. After he left, Elena stood frozen in the kitchen, the pasta sauce burning forgotten on the stove. Adrian turned off the burner and moved the pan, then pulled out his phone. I'm calling Rebecca, he said. The call that followed was tense. Rebecca was furious that Vance had approached Elena without going through proper channels, and even more furious that he'd shown up at Adrian's residence. This is intimidation, Rebecca said, her voice sharp over the speakerphone. He's trying to scare you into cooperating beyond your actual legal obligations. Elena, listen to me. You do not need immunity. You haven't committed any crimes. He's fishing, and he's doing it in the most unethical way possible. But what if he's right? Elena's voice was shaking. What if I am legally exposed because I lived in that penthouse and you're not? We've been through this. Benefiting from a spouse's income is not a crime, even if that income was illegally obtained, as long as you had no knowledge of the illegal activity. Rebecca's voice gentled slightly. Elena, this is a pressure tactic. Don't let it work. After the call ended, Elena and Adrian sat in heavy silence. The dinner was ruined, the evening destroyed, and something fundamental had shifted in the space between them. I can't do this anymore, Adrian finally said. Elena felt her heart stop. What? Not us. Not the relationship. Adrian took her hand and his eyes were pained. But I can't keep having my home invaded by federal investigators. I can't keep watching you be threatened and manipulated. I can't keep living in the center of someone else's legal nightmare. I understand. Elena pulled her hand back, trying to maintain dignity even as her chest cracked open. I'll pack my things. Elena, wait. No, you're right. She stood, needing movement to keep from falling apart. This isn't fair to you. It was never fair to you. You deserve a normal life with someone who isn't drowning in their ex-husband's federal charges. She went to the guest room and started throwing her belongings into her suitcase. Adrian followed, leaning in the doorway. I'm not breaking up with you, he said quietly. Elena stopped packing. Then what are you doing? I'm asking for space, distance. Not forever, but for now. Adrian's voice was rough. Elena, I care about you. A lot. But I'm also watching my professional reputation crumble and my personal life get invaded by investigators, and I need some breathing room to figure out if I can actually handle this long term. It was honest. It was fair. It also felt like a slow-motion goodbye. How much space? Elena asked. I don't know. Through the trial, at least. Well, let's let things settle. Let the media attention die down, and then we can figure out what comes next. Adrian stepped into the room. I'm not asking you to wait for me. If you meet someone else, if you move on, I'll understand. But I'm also not ready to completely let go. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She finished packing in silence while Adrian watched, and when she was done, he carried her suitcase to her car. Where will you go? He asked. My apartment, I guess. Face the reporters. Elena tried to smile. I can't hide forever. Adrian kissed her forehead, gentle and sad. For what it's worth, I really hoped this would work out differently. Me too. Elena drove back to her apartment in the dark, and when she pulled into her parking garage, the reporters were gone. The media had apparently moved on to other scandals, other stories. Her 15 minutes of tabloid fame had expired. She let herself into her quiet apartment and set her suitcase down in the entryway. The space felt smaller than she remembered, emptier. She'd been gone for nearly a month, and coming back felt like returning to a life that didn't quite fit anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Despite her better judgment, she opened it. I heard Vance came to see you. Don't believe his threats. You're not in any legal danger. My lawyers can confirm if you need them to. Stay strong. R. Elena stared at the message, fury and exhaustion warring in her chest. Even now, even from the center of his own destruction, Rafe was trying to manage her, to control the situation, to insert himself into her life. She blocked the number and turned off her phone. Then she sat in her dark apartment and cried for everything she'd lost: her marriage, her privacy, her chance with Adrian, and the simple, quiet life she'd been trying to build for herself before Rafe's empire came crashing down and buried her in the rubble. The trial was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until she'd have to sit on a witness stand and answer questions about a marriage she'd spent 8 years trying to escape. 3 weeks until both sides would try to use her words as weapons against each other. 3 weeks until whatever fragile peace she'd managed to build would be destroyed all over again. Elena wiped her eyes and stood up. She couldn't control what happened in that courtroom, couldn't control what the prosecution or defense asked her or how her testimony would be used, couldn't control whether Adrian would come back or whether the media would feast on her words or whether Rafe would be convicted or acquitted. But she could control how she faced it, with honesty, with dignity, with the truth, even when the truth was complicated and messy and didn't serve anyone's narrative. She'd survived 8 years of invisibility. She could survive this too. The first night back in her apartment, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her own bed, smaller and less comfortable than Adrian's guest room, and listened to the sounds of the city filtering through her windows. Car horns, distant sirens, the hum of air conditioning units, all the ambient noise of life continuing around her while hers felt suspended in legal limbo. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made tea. The kitchen was still half unpacked from when she'd moved in months ago, boxes of dishes she'd never bothered to unpack stacked against one wall. She told herself she was waiting to settle in properly, but the truth was, this apartment had never felt like home. It was just the place she'd fled to when leaving the penthouse, a temporary refuge that had become permanent by default. Her phone sat on the counter where she'd left it, still powered off. Elena stared at it for a long moment, then turned it back on. Messages flooded in immediately. 3 from Rebecca about trial preparation, 2 from her mother asking if the news stories were true, 1 from her sister offering vague support, and 1 from Adrian, time-stamped an hour ago. I know you're probably asleep. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how tonight ended. You didn't deserve that on top of everything else. I meant what I said about needing space, but I also want you to know I'm still here if you need anything. Elena read it 3 times, trying to decode the subtext. Was he already regretting asking for distance? Or was this just guilt, the good man's reflex to soften a blow he'd already delivered? She typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on something simple. I understand. Thank you for everything. Take care of yourself. She hit send before she could overthink it, then turned the phone off again. Whatever happened with Adrian would have to wait until after the trial. Right now, she needed to focus on survival. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Elena met with Rebecca almost daily, preparing for testimony. They practiced questions and answers until Elena could recite them in her sleep. Where did you live during your marriage? The penthouse at Riverside Tower. Who paid the mortgage? My husband. Did you have knowledge of how he earned his income? Only that he owned real estate and investment properties. Did you ever witness illegal activity? No. Did you ever suspect illegal activity? I chose not to ask questions about the specifics of his business. That last answer had taken 3 days to craft. Rebecca wanted Elena to be honest without sounding willfully ignorant, to acknowledge she'd maintained deliberate distance without admitting complicity. The prosecution is going to try to paint you as either a co-conspirator or an idiot, Rebecca explained during one of their sessions. Neither is true. You were a wife who respected professional boundaries and trusted your husband to handle his own business affairs. That's not a crime, and it's not stupidity. It's just how many marriages work. Except most marriages don't end with federal indictments, Elena pointed out. True, but that doesn't change the basic principle. Rebecca tapped her pen against her legal pad. Elena, the key to surviving this testimony is remembering that you don't owe either side a convenient narrative. Tell your truth. Let them figure out how to use it. The media attention had mostly died down after Elena returned to her apartment, but it flared up again when the prosecution released its witness list. Elena's name was on it, along with 43 others. The tabloids had a field day speculating about what she'd say, what she knew, whether she'd defend her ex-husband or bury him. One particularly vicious blogger suggested Elena was planning to write a tell-all book and cash in on the scandal. Another claimed she was secretly still in love with Rafe and would perjure herself to save him. Elena stopped reading the coverage after the third article called her a mob wife, despite the fact that Rafe had never been accused of anything involving organized crime. On the Thursday before the trial began, Elena received a subpoena, not for testimony that had already been arranged, but for documents. The prosecution wanted copies of every credit card statement, bank record, and financial transaction from her 8-year marriage. They wanted her personal calendar from the last 3 years. They wanted emails, text messages, and phone records. "This is standard," Rebecca assured her when Elena called in a panic. "They're building a timeline, looking for patterns. It doesn't mean they think you're guilty of anything." "It feels like they think I'm guilty of everything," Elena said. She spent the weekend in her apartment going through old files, pulling together the requested documents. It was strange, looking back through the financial archaeology of her marriage. Here was the credit card statement from their honeymoon in Tuscany, back when Rafe had still made time for her. Here were the receipts from the charity galas, hundreds of dollars spent on gowns she'd worn once and then donated. Here was the bank transfer from Rafe's account to hers, monthly deposits of money she'd barely touched because spending it felt like accepting the distance between them. She'd been so focused on feeling invisible that she'd never noticed how visible the money had made her. Every purchase tracked, every transaction recorded. 8 years of financial breadcrumbs that could now be followed by federal prosecutors looking for evidence of something she'd never been part of. Elena delivered the documents to Rebecca's office on Monday morning. The trial started Tuesday. That night, Elena couldn't eat. She ordered takeout she didn't want and let it sit congealing on her coffee table while she tried to watch television. Nothing held her attention. Every show seemed to feature courtroom drama or crime investigations, mirrors of the reality she was about to step into. Her phone rang at 9. Unknown number. Elena almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Elena," Rafe's voice, rough and quiet. "I know you blocked my numbers. I'm calling from Marion's phone. Don't hang up. I don't want to talk to you." But Elena didn't hang up either. "I just wanted to tell you something before tomorrow. Before the trial starts and everything becomes public record." Rafe took a breath. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, whatever questions they ask you, I don't blame you for anything you say, and I'm sorry you're being dragged into this at all." "You've apologized before," Elena said tiredly. "It doesn't change anything." "I know, but I needed to say it again anyway." A pause. "Elena, there's something else. Something I need you to know before you hear it in court." Elena's stomach tightened. "What?" "The blonde woman you saw me with, Vanessa. The prosecution is calling her as a witness too. They're going to try to suggest we were having an affair, that I divorced you to be with her." Rafe's voice was strained. "It's not true, it's never been true. But they're going to imply it anyway, and I didn't want you to be blindsided." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "Were you having an affair?" "No, never. She's Marion's associate, and she's married with 2 kids, and there's never been anything between us." Rafe sounded desperate for her to believe him. "But we were photographed together several times during the investigation, and the prosecution is going to twist that into something it wasn't." "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. "Because I don't want you to think—" Rafe stopped. "Because even though our marriage is over, even though I destroyed it, I still care what you think of me. And I don't want you sitting in that courtroom tomorrow hearing lies about why we divorced." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "We divorced because you were never really married to me, Rafe. You were married to your empire and your control and your need to keep everything compartmentalized. Whether you were sleeping with someone else is almost irrelevant." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "But I wasn't, for what it's worth." "It's worth something," Elena admitted. "Not enough to change anything, but something." After she hung up, Elena sat in the dark apartment trying to process. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a federal courthouse and sit in a witness box. Both sides would ask her questions designed to serve their narratives. The media would dissect every word, and somewhere in that courtroom, Rafe would be watching, hearing the truth about how completely he'd failed at the one relationship that should have mattered most. She didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she sat up until dawn, rehearsing answers and trying to prepare herself for the moment when her private pain would become public record. The courthouse was a maze of marble and security checkpoints. Elena arrived at 8:30, escorted by Rebecca through a side entrance to avoid the media circus at the front steps. The prosecution had agreed to call her early in their case, which meant she'd testify today and be done. No waiting, no extended agony. The witness waiting room was small and uncomfortable. Elena sat alone, reviewing her notes one more time, while Rebecca made phone calls in the hallway. At 9:15, a bailiff appeared. "Ms. Russo, they're ready for you." The courtroom was larger than Elena expected, packed with reporters and spectators and people whose faces she vaguely recognized from charity events years ago. The jury box held 12 solemn faces. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, sat elevated at the front. And at the defense table, flanked by Marion Voss and two other attorneys, was Rafe. He looked up as Elena entered, and their eyes met across the room. He looked tired, older, stripped of the confident armor she'd known for 8 years. He looked human in a way he never had before, and it made Elena's chest ache despite everything. The prosecution attorney, a sharp-faced man named Andrew Kellerman, stood as Elena was sworn in. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the witness box with her heart hammering against her ribs. "Good morning, Ms. Russo," Kellerman began, his voice professionally pleasant. "Thank you for being here today." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "Let's start with some basic background. You were married to the defendant, Rafael Moretti, for 8 years. Is that correct? Yes? And you filed for divorce approximately 4 months ago? Yes. Can you describe the nature of your relationship with Mr. Moretti? During your marriage? Elena took a breath, choosing her words carefully. Distant. He was frequently absent for work. We didn't spend much time together. Did he discuss his work with you? No. He kept his professional life very separate from our personal life. Separate enough that you had no knowledge of his business activities? Rebecca had warned her this question would come. I knew he owned real estate and investment properties. I knew he was successful. I didn't know the specifics of individual deals or transactions. Kellerman nodded, making a note. Ms. Russo, during your marriage, did you live in a penthouse apartment at Riverside Tower? Yes. And that property was purchased by Mr. Moretti in 2018 for approximately $12 million, is that correct? I don't know the exact purchase price, Elena kept her voice steady. But yes, he owned the penthouse. Did you ever question where he got the money to afford such an expensive property? He told me it was from his real estate investments. I had no reason to doubt him. You had no reason to doubt him, Kellerman repeated, skepticism clear in his tone. Ms. Russo, you're asking this jury to believe that you lived in a $12 million apartment, wore designer clothes, attended exclusive events, and never once wondered if your husband's wealth came from illegal sources. Rebecca stood immediately. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. The judge looked at Kellerman over her glasses. Ask questions, counselor. Save the speeches for closing arguments. Kellerman adjusted his approach. Miss Russo, did you ever meet any of Mr. Moretti's business associates? Yes, at social events and charity functions. Can you describe these associates? Elena thought carefully. Some were clearly legitimate business people, real estate developers, attorneys, financial advisors. Others were less clear about what they did. They talked vaguely about opportunities and investments without specific details. And did these vague discussions concern you? Sometimes. Elena met Kellerman's eyes. But when I asked Rafe about specific people, he told me they were professional contacts and I should focus on being a good hostess rather than interrogating his guests. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Rafe's face was unreadable. Kellerman pulled out a photograph. Ms. Russo, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 47. Can you identify the people in this photograph? Elena looked at the image, a charity gala from 2 years ago. She recognized herself in a red gown, standing next to Rafe. Beside them was a heavy-set man with cold eyes who'd made her uncomfortable all evening. That's me and Rafe. The other man is Vincent Caruso. He was at several events we attended. Did Mr. Moretti tell you anything about Mr. Caruso? He said Caruso was a business partner, real estate development, I think. And did you know that Vincent Caruso has been convicted of money laundering and is currently serving a federal sentence? Elena felt her face drain. No, I didn't know that. Kellerman pulled out another photo. How about this man? Exhibit 51. Marcus, something Torres, maybe? He was at our New Year's party 2 years ago. Marcus Torres, also convicted of racketeering, currently awaiting sentencing. Kellerman's voice was relentless. Ms. Russo, you're telling this jury you had no idea your husband was associating with convicted criminals? I knew some of his associates made me uncomfortable. Elena's voice was shaking now. But no, I didn't know they were criminals. Rafe never told me that. Convenient, Kellerman said softly. Objection. Rebecca was on her feet. Counsel is testifying instead of questioning. Sustained. Mr. Kellerman, last warning. Kellerman nodded, but the damage was done. He spent the next hour walking Elena through financial records, asking about specific purchases and transactions, building a picture of a woman who'd lived lavishly on potentially illegal funds. Elena answered honestly. Yes, Rafe had bought her jewelry. Yes, she'd used credit cards he paid for. Yes, she'd attended events where business was discussed. But she also made clear, again and again, that she'd never participated in any business decisions, never signed documents related to his companies, never handled money beyond her personal expenses. Ms. Russo, Kellerman finally said, you're asking this jury to believe you were married to Mr. Moretti for 8 years, lived in his home, spent his money, met his associates, and somehow remained completely ignorant of his criminal activities. I'm not asking the jury to believe anything, Elena said quietly. I'm just telling the truth. Rafe kept me separate from his business, deliberately, completely. Whether that was to protect me or to protect himself, I don't know. But I wasn't part of it. Kellerman looked like he wanted to argue further, but instead he nodded. No further questions. Rebecca stood for redirect. Ms. Russo, you mentioned that your husband kept you deliberately separate from his business. Can you explain what you mean by that? Elena gathered her thoughts. Rafe maintained very strict boundaries. He had a home office I wasn't allowed to enter. He took phone calls in private. When business associates came to the penthouse, I was expected to serve drinks and make conversation, but if discussions turned to actual business, he'd move everyone to his office. I was kept decorative, not operational. And how did that make you feel? Invisible. Elena's voice broke slightly. Like I was a prop in his life instead of a partner. Is that why you filed for divorce? Yes. I couldn't live that way anymore. Rebecca nodded gently. Ms. Russo, Mr. Kellerman showed you photographs of convicted criminals who attended events with you and your husband. At these events, did anyone ever discuss illegal activities in your presence? No. Did anyone ever ask you to participate in illegal activities? No. Did your husband ever tell you he was involved in illegal activities? No, never. Thank you. No further questions. Marion Voss stood for cross-examination, and Elena braced herself. Marion was known for being surgical with witnesses, finding weaknesses and exploiting them without mercy. Ms. Russo, Marion began, her voice surprisingly gentle. You loved your husband when you married him, didn't you? Elena was thrown by the question. Yes. And you wanted the marriage to work? Yes. So when he kept you separate from his business, when he maintained these boundaries you described, you didn't push back because you wanted to respect his professional life. Partly, Elena saw where this was going. But also because when I did ask questions, he shut me down. Shut you down how? He'd tell me it was complicated, that I wouldn't understand, that I should trust him to handle things. Elena's voice hardened. He made it clear my job was to be his wife, not his business partner. Marion nodded. Ms. Russo, you testified that you attended charity events with your husband. Did he donate substantial amounts to these charities? Yes. Hundreds of thousands of dollars? I believe so. Did these donations seem to you like the actions of a criminal? Rebecca stood. Objection. Calls for speculation about Mr. Moretti's state of mind. Sustained, Marion rephrased. Miss Russo, did you ever witness Mr. Moretti engage in charitable activities that seemed genuine rather than calculated? Elena thought carefully. Yes, he funded a scholarship program for underprivileged students. He never publicized it or took credit. I only knew because I handled the thank you notes from recipients. So, to your knowledge, your husband engaged in legitimate charitable work? Yes. And to your knowledge, he maintained legitimate business interests in real estate and investment? Yes. And to your knowledge, he never asked you to lie, hide evidence, or participate in illegal activities? That's correct? Marion looked satisfied. No further questions. Elena was dismissed. She walked out of the courtroom on shaking legs, Rebecca guiding her through a back hallway to avoid reporters. They made it to Rebecca's car before Elena finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. You did great, Rebecca said, rubbing Elena's back. You were honest and clear. That's all we could ask for. I just testified in a federal criminal trial, Elena said through tears. I just sat there while lawyers tried to make me look like either a criminal or an idiot, and there was nothing I could do except tell the truth and hope someone believed me. They believed you, Rebecca assured her. The jury was listening. You came across as credible. Elena didn't feel credible. She felt exposed and raw and utterly exhausted. Rebecca drove her home, and Elena spent the rest of the day in her apartment watching news coverage of her own testimony. The analysts were split. Some thought she'd been genuinely ignorant of Rafe's activities. Others thought her claims of ignorance were convenient and suspicious. One legal expert said her testimony had hurt the prosecution's case by establishing reasonable doubt about how much Rafe's associates actually knew about his illegal activities. Another said she'd hurt the defense by painting Rafe as controlling and secretive. Elena turned off the television and sat in silence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. I watched your testimony. You were incredibly brave. I hope you're okay. Elena stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Thank you. Not sure about brave, but it's done. That's brave enough. Take care of yourself. She wanted to ask if he'd reconsidered the space he needed, if watching her testify had changed anything, but she didn't have the energy for complicated conversations. Instead, she just sent back a simple thank you and set the phone aside. That night, Elena's doorbell rang at 10 p.m. She checked the peephole and saw someone she didn't recognize, a man in his 60s wearing a casual jacket and looking uncomfortable. Miss Russo? He called through the door. I'm Thomas Gray. I drive for Mr. Moretti. Can I speak with you for just a moment? Elena hesitated, then opened the door with the chain still attached. What do you want? Mr. Moretti asked me to deliver something to you. Thomas held up a large envelope. He said to tell you it's not a message or a letter, just documents he thought you should have. No strings attached. I don't want anything from him. I understand. Thomas set the envelope down outside her door. But ma'am, if I may, I've driven for Mr. Moretti for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go in his life, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you in that courtroom today. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. That doesn't change anything. Maybe not. But some things are worth knowing anyway. Thomas tipped his head respectfully. Take care, Ms. Russo. After he left, Elena stared at the envelope for a long time before finally bringing it inside. She opened it carefully, half expecting legal documents or some new manipulation. Instead, she found the deed to the penthouse, fully transferred to her name, no liens, no conditions, and a single handwritten note on Rafe's personal stationery. Elena, this was supposed to be our home. It never was, not really, but it's yours now, free and clear. Do with it what you want. Sell it, rent it, turn it into something good. I don't care. I just want you to have something that's completely yours, with no connection to me or my mess. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm just trying to give you back something I took away. Your freedom to choose. Whatever happens with the trial, whatever happens to me, I hope you find the life you deserve, the one I was too broken to give you. Elena read the note 3 times, then looked at the deed. $12 million worth of real estate, transferred to her without conditions. It was the kind of grand gesture Rafe had always preferred, throwing money at problems instead of actually fixing them. But it was also, Elena realized, the only apology he knew how to make, the only language he spoke fluently when emotions failed him. She set the documents aside and went to bed, too exhausted to process what it meant. Tomorrow, Rafe's trial would continue without her. Tomorrow, she could start trying to rebuild a life that wasn't defined by his choices. Tomorrow, she could finally start being something other than Rafael Moretti's ex-wife. But tonight, she let herself cry one more time for the marriage that had never been, and the man who'd finally learned to let her go. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Elena didn't attend after her testimony, but she couldn't escape it either. The news coverage was relentless. Expert analysis, courtroom sketches, breathless speculation about whether Rafael Moretti would be convicted or walk free. Elena stopped watching after the 3rd week when a legal commentator suggested her testimony had been the prosecution's weakest link, that her claimed ignorance had inadvertently supported the defense's argument that Rafe compartmentalized his operation so effectively that even his own wife didn't know what he was doing. Elena threw the remote at the television and didn't turn it back on. Instead, she focused on the penthouse deed sitting on her kitchen counter. $12 million worth of real estate that she had no idea what to do with. Rebecca had verified the transfer was legal and unconditional. Rafe had signed it over 3 days before his arrest, apparently anticipating that everything else would be frozen by federal seizure. It was clean money, purchased before the illegal activities the prosecution was alleging, which meant Elena could keep it regardless of the trial's outcome. "Sell it," her sister Maria advised during a phone call. "Take the money and start over somewhere new, somewhere nobody knows you as Moretti's ex-wife." "Keep it," her mother countered when Elena called her next. "It's security. You've earned it after what he put you through." But Elena didn't want to sell it, and she didn't want to keep it. Both options felt like they were still about Rafe, still letting him define her choices even from the defendant's table in federal court. 3 weeks into the trial, Elena drove to the penthouse for the first time since signing the divorce papers. The building's doorman recognized her and waved her through without question, and Elena rode the elevator up 43 floors with her heart in her throat. The penthouse looked exactly as she'd left it. Rafe's belongings were still there. His books, his expensive art collection, the home office she'd never been allowed to enter. But there was also a strange emptiness to it now, like the space itself knew it had been abandoned by both of them. Elena walked through rooms that had witnessed 8 years of loneliness. The dining room where she'd eaten countless solo dinners while Rafe worked late. The bedroom where they'd slept beside each other like polite strangers. The balcony where she'd stood so many nights watching the city lights and wondering if this was all her life would ever be. She found herself in Rafe's office. The door was unlocked now, no longer forbidden territory. The desk was clear, presumably cleaned out by federal agents during their search. But the bookshelves remained filled with business journals and legal texts and, surprisingly, novels. Elena pulled one out and found Rafe's handwriting in the margins, notes and reactions to passages about love and loss and the cost of ambition. He'd been human here, in this private space she'd never been allowed to see. Vulnerable in ways he'd never shown her during their marriage. Elena set the book down and walked back to the main living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and she stood there imagining different possibilities. This space, with its obscene square footage and its history of isolation, could become something else, something that mattered. The idea took root slowly, growing clearer over the following days. Elena researched transitional housing programs, spoke with nonprofit directors, consulted with architects about converting luxury space into functional living quarters. And slowly, a vision emerged. The penthouse could house 12 women, survivors of domestic violence, women escaping dangerous situations, women who needed safety and stability while they rebuilt their lives. It could provide 6 months of free housing, job training, counseling services. It could transform the symbol of Elena's loneliest years into a place where other women found freedom. It was perfect, it was right, and it was entirely hers to choose. Elena was meeting with the nonprofit director about the conversion logistics when Rebecca called with news about the trial. "Verdict's in," Rebecca said without preamble. "Jury deliberated for 11 hours. They're reading it in an hour." Elena's stomach dropped. "What do you think?" 11 hours is a long time. Could go either way. Rebecca paused. "Do you want to be there?" Did she? Elena thought about walking into that courtroom again, seeing Rafe's face as his fate was decided, watching him either walk free or be led away in handcuffs. Part of her wanted to be there for closure. Part of her wanted to be anywhere else. "No," she finally said. "I don't need to be there. Just call me when it's over." She tried to go back to her meeting with the nonprofit director, but concentration was impossible. They rescheduled for next week, and Elena went home to wait. The call came 2 hours later. "Guilty," Rebecca said. multiple counts: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. The jury acquitted on 2 of the lesser charges but convicted on everything major. Elena sat down heavily. Sentencing? 3 weeks. Federal guidelines suggest anywhere from 15 to 25 years. But with potential cooperation and first-time offender status, he might get less. Rebecca's voice was carefully neutral. How are you doing? I don't know. Elena felt numb. Is that awful? That I don't know how I feel about my ex-husband being convicted of federal crimes? It's human, Rebecca said gently. Elena, you're allowed to have complicated feelings about this. He hurt you, but you also spent 8 years of your life with him. Both things can be true. After the call ended, Elena turned on the news. Footage showed Rafe being led from the courthouse, his face carefully blank, Marion Voss beside him making statements about appeals. The news anchors discussed the verdict with barely concealed excitement, already speculating about sentencing and whether Rafe would cooperate with prosecutors to reduce his time. Elena watched it all with a strange detachment. This was the man she'd married, the man who'd made her feel invisible for 8 years, the man who'd finally seen her only when it was too late, and now he was a convicted felon facing decades in federal prison. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. I saw the news. Are you okay? Elena stared at the message for a long time before responding. I think so. Strange day, I can imagine. Do you want company? No pressure, just offering. The offer was tempting, but Elena realized she needed to be alone with this. Thank you, but I think I need to process. Rain check? Anytime. That night, Elena received a call from Thomas Gray, Rafe's driver. Ms. Russo, I apologize for calling so late. Mr. Moretti asked if I would deliver something to you. Thomas sounded tired. I know you probably don't want anything from him right now, but he was very insistent. Elena almost said no, but curiosity won. What is it? A letter. Just a letter. He said it's not asking for anything, just explaining some things he thought you should know. Thomas paused. I can leave it with your building's doorman if you prefer. You don't have to see me. No, it's fine. You can bring it up. 20 minutes later, Elena accepted a sealed envelope from Thomas. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but just nodded respectfully and left. Elena sat on her couch and opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter was handwritten on plain paper, no expensive stationery this time. Rafe's familiar script filled 3 pages. Elena, by the time you read this, you'll know I've been convicted. Marion tells me I'm looking at 18 months minimum, possibly more. I won't insult you by saying I don't deserve it. I knew the risks of the choices I made. But I wanted to explain some things before I disappear into the federal prison system for the next year or 2 of my life. I married you because you were the first person I'd met in 15 years who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a bank account or a business opportunity. You were real in a way nothing else in my life was real, and I loved you for that, even though I never learned how to show it properly. The distance I maintained wasn't just about protecting you from legal exposure, though that was part of it. It was also about protecting you from me, from the parts of myself I was ashamed of, the choices I knew were wrong, but made anyway because I'd been making them so long I didn't know how to stop. I thought if I kept you separate from all that, you could stay clean, stay good. Stay the one pure thing in my otherwise compromised life. What I didn't understand until it was too late was that making you feel invisible hurt you more than the truth ever could have. I chose protection over partnership, and in doing so, I lost the only relationship that actually mattered. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that these last few months, watching you walk away, watching you choose yourself, watching you become visible again, have been both the most painful and the most important of my life. You deserve so much better than what I gave you, and I'm genuinely glad you're finally taking it. The penthouse is yours. Do whatever you want with it. I heard through my attorney that you're considering turning it into transitional housing, and Elena, that's perfect. That's exactly what it should be. Take something I used to demonstrate wealth and power and turn it into something that actually helps people. That's more redemption than I deserve, but I'm grateful for it anyway. I'm going to use my time in prison to become someone different. Not because I think it'll win you back. I know that door is closed, and it should be. but because I need to figure out who Rafael Moretti is when he's not building empires or controlling outcomes. I need to learn how to be present instead of powerful, how to be honest instead of strategic. Prison will strip away everything I've used to define myself, and maybe that's exactly what I need. Thank you for 8 years. Thank you for trying. Thank you for finally having the courage to leave when I didn't have the courage to change. And thank you for showing me, even in our ending, what real strength looks like. I hope you find everything you're looking for. You deserve every bit of happiness you can build. Rafe. Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It was the most honest communication Rafe had ever given her. No manipulation, no strategy. Just raw acknowledgement of everything he'd done wrong and everything she'd deserved instead. It didn't change the past, but it closed something that had been bleeding open inside her for months. The next morning, Elena called the nonprofit director and finalized plans for the penthouse conversion. It would take 6 months and substantial renovation, but by spring, 12 women would have safe housing and a chance to rebuild their lives in the space where Elena had once felt so alone. She threw herself into the project with single-minded focus. Working with architects and contractors and social workers gave Elena purpose she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't Rafael Moretti's ex-wife on this project. She was Elena Russo, founder of a program that would help women who needed exactly what she'd needed: a way out, a fresh start, and proof that their lives could be different. Adrian called 2 weeks after the verdict. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about the space I asked for. About us." Elena's heart clenched. Okay. I was scared of the media attention in the investigation and having my life invaded, and I let that fear make me pull away from something that was real and good. Adrian took a breath. "I've watched you these past few weeks, Elena. Watched you testify and survive and take that penthouse and turn it into something beautiful. And I realized I was an idiot to walk away." Adrian, wait, let me finish. I'm not asking to jump right back into where we were, but I'm asking if maybe we can try again. Slowly, without the pressure of federal trials and media scrutiny, just you and me figuring out if this could actually work. Elena closed her eyes, feeling hope and caution warring in her chest. "I'm not the same person I was 2 months ago. I know that's part of what I'm asking for, the chance to know who you are now without all the external chaos." Adrian's voice was warm. "So, what do you say? Coffee sometime? Dinner? A conversation where we're not discussing federal investigations?" Elena smiled despite herself. "Coffee sounds good. Let's start there." They met 3 days later at the Riverside coffee shop where they'd gone after the divorce signing. It felt like returning to a beginning, trying again with clear eyes and more honest expectations. "Tell me about the penthouse project," Adrian said after they'd settled at their usual table. Elena lit up talking about it. The design plans, the partnership with the domestic violence shelter, the women who would eventually call it home. Adrian listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions from his architectural expertise. It felt natural, easy, like they'd finally found their rhythm without the weight of someone else's disaster pressing down on them. "I'm proud of you," Adrian said when she finished, "for taking something painful and turning it into something that matters." "It's not altruism," Elena admitted. "It's also selfish. I need to know that those 8 years weren't completely wasted, that something good can come from all that loneliness. That's not selfish. That's human." Adrian reached across the table for her hand. "Elena, I mean what I said about trying again. But I also need you to be honest with me about where your head is, about your feelings for Rafe." Elena considered the question carefully. "I don't love him anymore, at least not the way I did when we got married, but I also can't just erase 8 years. There's grief there, and anger, and something that might be compassion for the person he's trying to become in prison. It's complicated." "I can work with complicated," Adrian said, "as long as it's honest complicated." They dated slowly over the following months. Coffee dates became dinners. Dinners became gallery visits and weekend hikes and quiet evenings at Adrian's place cooking together. It wasn't dramatic or consuming. It was steady and real and built on actual communication instead of grand gestures. Elena liked it, more than liked it. She trusted it in a way she'd never quite trusted her relationship with Rafe. Rafe's sentencing happened on a cold November morning. Elena didn't attend, but Rebecca called her afterward with the details. 18 months in federal prison followed by 3 years supervised release, Rebecca reported. Marion argued for leniency based on his cooperation with ongoing investigations into his former associates. The judge was relatively sympathetic. That's less than I expected, Elena said. Federal sentencing guidelines allowed for it since most of the charges involved financial crimes rather than violence. He'll likely serve the full 18 months at a minimum security facility. Rebecca paused. Marion mentioned that Moretti has enrolled in educational programs and therapy sessions through the prison system. Apparently he's taking this rehabilitation thing seriously. Elena filed that information away without examining it too closely. What Rafe did with his time in prison was his business, not hers. The penthouse conversion finished in late March, right on schedule. Elena stood in the transformed space and barely recognized it. Where there had been one massive master suite, there were now 6 small but comfortable bedrooms. The formal dining room had become a communal kitchen and eating area. Rafe's forbidden office was now a computer lab and counseling space. 12 women moved in over the following 2 weeks. Elena met each of them during orientation. Domestic violence survivors, women escaping trafficking situations, mothers fleeing abuse with their children. Each had a story that broke Elena's heart and a determination that inspired her. "Thank you for this," one woman named Sarah said during a house meeting. She was 26, escaping a marriage that had almost killed her. "I don't know where I'd be without this place. Probably back with him because I had nowhere else to go." Elena thought about her own escape, about the privilege that had made it easier, her education, her lack of children, the financial resources to rent her own apartment while the divorce processed. These women had none of those advantages. They needed exactly what this space provided. "You're giving me more than I'm giving you," Elena said honestly. "You're showing me what courage actually looks like." Adrian helped Elena organize a fundraiser to support the program's ongoing operations. His architecture firm donated services for future expansions. His contacts in the nonprofit world opened doors Elena hadn't known existed. "You're good at this," he told her one evening while they reviewed grant applications. "At building something that matters." "I'm learning," Elena said. "It turns out being invisible for 8 years taught me to see other people who feel invisible. That's worth something." 6 months into Rafe's sentence, Elena received another letter forwarded through Thomas Gray. She almost didn't open it, but curiosity won again. "Elena, I don't expect you to respond to this. I'm writing more for myself than for you, trying to practice the kind of honest communication my therapist keeps telling me I avoided for decades. Prison is exactly as bad as you'd imagine, and also nothing like I expected. The physical discomfort is manageable. The loss of control and autonomy is harder. But the hardest part is having nothing to do except think about the choices that brought me here. I've started teaching a financial literacy class to other inmates. It's basic stuff: budgeting, understanding credit, avoiding predatory loans, teaching men who made similar mistakes to mine how to build legitimate lives when they get out. It's not redemption, but it's something." My therapist asked me what I learned from our marriage. I told her I learned that love isn't about control, that partnership requires vulnerability. I was never willing to risk. That making someone feel invisible because you're afraid of being seen yourself is cowardice, not protection. She asked if I'd do anything differently if I had the chance. I said everything. I'd do everything differently. I'd tell you the truth from the beginning. I'd let you choose whether to stay with full knowledge of who I was. I'd show up for dinners and anniversaries and all the small moments I thought didn't matter, but turned out to be the only things that did. I heard about the penthouse program. Thomas sends me updates, probably more than I deserve. He told me 12 women are living there now, rebuilding their lives in the space where I destroyed mine. That feels right. That feels like the universe correcting a mistake. I have 14 months left on my sentence. When I get out, I'm not going to contact you. I'm not going to show up asking for second chances or trying to insert myself back into your life. You've moved on, and you should. You deserve someone who knows how to actually love you, not someone who's still learning basic emotional literacy at 46 years old. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying, not for you, for myself, trying to become someone who could have deserved you in the first place. I hope you're happy, Elena. I hope you're building a life that makes you visible in all the ways I never did. Our Elena folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer with the previous one. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Rafe was working on himself, and that was good, but it was also no longer her concern. Her concern was the fundraiser next week, and the 2 new women moving into the penthouse, and the grant proposal she was writing to expand the program to a second location. Her concern was Adrian, who'd become a genuine partner in ways Rafe never had, supporting her work while building his own career without either of them getting lost in the other's shadow. Her concern was her own life, finally, completely. Elena's divorce was finalized 10 months after Rafe's sentencing. The judge signed the papers without drama or ceremony, and just like that, 8 years of marriage were legally dissolved. Elena celebrated by taking Adrian to dinner at an expensive restaurant she'd never been to with Rafe. "To new beginnings," Adrian toasted, raising his wine glass. "To choosing yourself," Elena countered, clinking her glass against his. They stayed out late, talking about Adrian's new museum commission and Elena's plans to open a second transitional house. They talked about taking a vacation together, maybe Italy or Greece, somewhere neither of them had been before. They talked about the future in concrete terms instead of careful hypotheticals. When Adrian drove Elena home that night, he walked her to her apartment door like he always did. "I have something to ask you," he said, suddenly serious. Elena's heart jumped. "Okay. Move in with me." Adrian took her hands, not because it's practical or because we're following some relationship timeline, but because I want to wake up with you. I want to build a life with someone who's honest and brave and knows how to show up. I want to build that with you. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "That's a big step." "I know, and if it's too fast, we can wait. But Elena, I'm sure about this, about us. I've been sure for months." Adrian smiled. "So what do you say?" Elena thought about the apartment she'd rented as a refuge, the space that had never quite felt like home. She thought about Adrian's townhouse with its warm kitchen and comfortable couch, and the way it felt like possibility instead of loneliness. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want to build that with you." They moved her belongings over the following month, and Elena found herself creating a home for the first time in years. Not a showpiece, not a refuge. Just a place where 2 people who'd chosen each other could build something real. Rafe was released from federal prison on a Tuesday morning in early June. Elena knew because Thomas called to tell her, respecting her request to be informed but not involved. "He's going to a halfway house in the east side," Thomas reported, "finishing his supervised release there. He's got a job lined up at a restaurant through a re-entry program." "A restaurant?" Elena was surprised. "Dishwasher to start, working his way up." Thomas sounded almost proud. He said he wanted to do something with his hands, something honest and simple. Elena thanked Thomas for the update and went back to her grant writing. She didn't think about Rafe much after that. Didn't wonder where he was or what he was doing. She'd built a life that didn't require his participation or approval, and she was determined to keep it that way. 3 months after Rafe's release, Elena was at the penthouse overseeing a house meeting when Thomas called again. Russo, I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Moretti asked me to let you know he's transferred full ownership of something else to you. The house in the Hamptons. He wanted you to know it's yours, no strings attached, and he thought you might want to use it for the women's program, respite weekends or something. Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Tell him thank you, and tell him I hope he's doing well." "I will." Thomas paused. "If I may say, ma'am, he's different now, quieter, more present. He's working hard at that restaurant and living in a small apartment and going to therapy twice a week. I think prison actually changed him." "Good," Elena said sincerely. "I hope it sticks." She did convert the Hamptons house into a respite center, a place where the women in her program could take weekends away from the city and just breathe. It opened in September with a small ceremony that Adrian helped organize. "You're building something incredible," he told her that night, standing on the beach house deck watching the sunset. "A whole network of support for women who need exactly what you needed." "It's the only thing that makes the last 9 years make sense," Elena admitted. "All that loneliness, all that feeling invisible. At least now it's become something that helps other people be seen." Adrian pulled her close. "You know what I love about you? You take broken things and make them beautiful. Broken marriages and housing programs, broken trust into honest relationships, You're an alchemist, Elena Russo. She laughed. That's very poetic for an architect. I have my moments. He kissed the top of her head. Speaking of which, I have something for you. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Elena's breath caught. Before you panic, Adrian said quickly, this isn't an engagement ring. It's a promise ring. A promise that I'm in this for the long haul no matter what complications come up. A promise that I see you and I choose you and I'm not going anywhere. He opened the box to reveal a simple silver band with a small diamond. Adrian. Elena's voice broke. You don't have to wear it if it's too much. I just wanted you to know that I'm serious about us, about building a life together. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, for more than that, I'll be here. Adrian took the ring out and held it up. So what do you say? Partners? Elena held out her hand, tears streaming down her face. Partners. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. A year after Rafe's release, Elena received one final letter. It came directly this time, no courier, just regular mail with a return address from a modest apartment in Queens. Elena, this is the last letter I'll write you. I'm respecting your space and your new life, and I genuinely don't want to intrude on that. But I wanted you to know that I finished my supervised release last week. I'm fully free now, legally speaking, and I've used this time to become someone different, someone better, I hope. I'm assistant manager at the restaurant now. I'm mentoring other formerly incarcerated people trying to rebuild their lives. I'm in therapy, and I'm learning about emotional regulation and healthy communication and all the things I should have learned 30 years ago. I'm not asking for anything from you, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even acknowledgement. I just wanted to tell you that you were right about everything and that becoming the person who could have deserved you, even though I'll never get the chance to prove it to you, has been the most important work of my life. I heard you got engaged. Thomas told me, probably breaking about 6 different confidentiality agreements to do it. I'm happy for you, Elena, and genuinely happy. You deserve someone who knows how to show up from the beginning, not someone who had to lose everything to learn basic human decency. Thank you for 8 years. Thank you for the penthouse and the beach house and trusting me enough to turn them into something good. Thank you for showing me what I'd become and giving me the space to become something else. I hope you have a beautiful wedding and a beautiful life. I hope you're never invisible again. Live well, Elena. You've earned it. Rafe. Elena read the letter twice, then showed it to Adrian. How do you feel about that? Adrian asked carefully. Relieved, Elena said honestly. It's closure, real closure. He's letting me go completely. Good. Adrian kissed her forehead. You deserve to be let go, to just exist without his shadow hanging over everything. Elena folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the others. Part of her history, but not her present, not her future. 3 months later, Elena and Adrian got married in a small ceremony on the beach in front of the respite house. 50 people attended, close friends, family, and several women from the transitional housing program who'd become like sisters to Elena over the past 2 years. Elena wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Adrian cried when she walked down the makeshift aisle. They wrote their own vows, promising presence and honesty and partnership. Promising to see each other fully and love each other anyway. It was nothing like Elena's first wedding, no orchestra, no designer gown, no guest list of business associates she didn't know. It was small and real and completely theirs. During the reception, Elena stepped away for a moment to walk on the beach alone. She stood at the water's edge and thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. Lonely and invisible, desperate for scraps of attention from a man who didn't know how to give them. That woman felt like a stranger now. Elena had become someone new, someone who ran a nonprofit that housed dozens of women each year, someone who'd turned her pain into purpose, someone who'd learned that being seen wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about the daily choice to show up, to communicate, to partner with someone who valued presence over power. She'd survived Rafael Moretti. More than survived, she'd transformed everything he'd broken into something that healed other people's brokenness. That was better than forgiveness. That was redemption. Adrian appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers. You okay? Better than okay. Elena smiled up at him. I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. Good. He pulled her close. That's all I ever wanted for you. They stood together watching the waves, and Elena thought about all the paths that had led her here. The lonely marriage that taught her what she didn't want, the divorce that freed her, the trial that stripped everything down to truth, the choice to take her pain and build something meaningful from it. Raphael Moretti had given her loneliness, and then, finally, freedom. Adrian Cole had given her partnership and presence. But the most important gift had come from herself, the courage to choose visibility, to demand more, to become someone who wouldn't settle for anything less than being fully, completely seen. That evening, as Elena and Adrian danced at their reception surrounded by people who loved them, Elena caught a glimpse of Thomas Gray standing at the edge of the property. He raised a hand in a small wave, and Elena understood. He'd come to witness her happiness, to bring closure for Rafe even though Rafe couldn't be there himself. Elena waved back, a gesture of acknowledgement and goodbye. Then she turned back to Adrian, to her new marriage, to the life she'd built from the ashes of her old one. She was Elena Russo Cole now, and she was exactly where she belonged, visible, valued, and finally, completely free. The past would always be part of her story, but it was no longer the only story she had to tell. This was her new beginning, and this time she was writing it herself.